The anime begins with our protagonist, who, for now, does not have a name. He appears frustrated, since the servers of the game he used to play have just been shut down. As someone who spent at least 10 years immersed in the world of games, he decides to act logically, like any gamer would, and chooses to search the internet for a truly difficult game. During the search, he comes across a strange page. Upon opening it and analyzing the options, he notices a mode called Inferno, described as so cruel that there would not even be time to cry. That catches his attention. Observing the huge difference in difficulty between the classes, he chooses the Summoner, which was considered even harder than the Demon King himself. However, for this class, it would be necessary to start as a simple deer and then undergo a test. He finds it strange, but ends up thinking that he should accept it. Curious, he agrees and clicks the option. Next, he is transported to another world, where he practically is reborn. His new parents give him the name Alan. We then discover that, to level up in that mode, it would be necessary to gain 100 times more experience than in normal mode. In addition, there was no time limit, and if he managed to escape that inferno, he would certainly uncover the secrets of that world. Thus, time passes, and we learn that, in his previous life, his real name was Kenichi Yamada, a 35-year-old man, unemployed, single, and without a social life. Now, with only 1 year of age, having reincarnated in that world had saved his life. He feels grateful because, despite still being unable to speak, he understands everything perfectly, since everything is automatically translated for him. As the game itself indicated, he would begin as a serf. His family works cultivating deforested land to pay taxes to the lord of those lands. His mother is named Teresia, and his father, Laudem. Both appear to be around 20 years old and show great love and affection for him. Alan pretends to be tired so that they put him to sleep, and when he is alone, he tries to open his status window. However, nothing happens. He has been trying since he arrived in that world, but without success. Even enjoying the comfortable life he leads, always in his mother's arms and with clean diapers, he is still a summoner and wants to test magic. Suddenly, something finally works, and a book appears before him. However, any sudden movement makes noise and could draw attention. Fortunately, the book soon disappears, and he pretends to be sleeping again. His parents, more at ease, leave him alone once more. He takes advantage of the moment to try to access the summoning guild. There, he confirms that his class is indeed summoner. Although his statistics are very low, he understands that he will need a lot of experience to become stronger, and that the more he uses summons, the faster he will evolve. For now, he can only summon insects and small animals, which he finds curious. His rank is H. The book shines, and a message from the god of that world appears, apologizing for not having sent the grimoire earlier, explaining that the class was still in testing. It would no longer be possible to change anything, as that was the signature of the goddess of creation. Alan understands the situation and is not bothered by it. Now, he just wants to see his summoning in action. He tries, but does not succeed immediately. There is no internet there, so he realizes that he will have to find solutions on his own. He imagines that he will first need to create an insect and then summon it. Excited, he tries again, but ends up making noise, which makes his mother peek in. Luckily, she does not notice anything strange. Alan takes a nap and decides to rest, lamenting the fact that a 1-year-old baby does not have much energy. The next day, while his mother takes care of the house and his father works, he takes advantage of nap time to try again. This time, he manages to summon a grasshopper, but does not pay much attention to it. He registers the summon in the guild and notices that the rank H insect has no name. He then decides to call it Denka. Below that, blessings appear that increase the grasshopper's speed and endurance. Alan is surprised to realize that his own statistics have also increased. However, the noise draws attention, and his mother enters the room. Quickly, he sends Denka back to the other world. Thus, the days pass, and Alan continues testing his summoning magic. He gains a new companion, a mouse named Shorisuk, who begins to spy for him, even though it has little intelligence. At the moment, Alan can store up to 10 summons, depending on the blessings of the monsters he keeps. His statistics increase. By storing 10 Shorisuk, his strength rises by more than 10 points, making him stronger than children of the same age. leveling up would unlock several abilities. But since it is 100 times harder, he begins to regret it, thinking that he may never be able to finish it. At that moment, his father arrives home, and Teresia is startled to see him looking like that. Even as he asks them not to worry, he explains that he hunted a boar. He asks if Alan wants to see it, and the boy responds excitedly, since he wants to see the first monster of that world. As they walk to the location, Laudum points to migratory birds heading north, explaining that they announce autumn. He says that Alan's name was inspired by those monsters, which can go anywhere, flying freely to the ends of the world. He comments, laughing, that the mother got angry because he chose a name inspired by monsters. When they arrive with the boar, Alan is impressed by its size. Gelda announces that the hero of the day has arrived, and Laudum asks her not to exaggerate, introducing Alan to her son, who is surprised to see him talking at only 1-year-old. Alan asks if the boar was strong, and Gelda explains that it took 20 people to defeat it, since it was a rank C monster. 10 months pass, and Alan finally reaches level 2 as a summoner. Now, he can create rank G summons and even synthesize them. His storage space increases, and he gains a kind of memo where he keeps information and thoughts. Excited, he wants to try synthesis, but since he still does not have enough mana, he decides to eat, recover energy, and then test it quickly. Even so, he continues completely without mana. Still, Alan does not think about giving up. If he cannot perform monster synthesis, he decides to try creating a rank G1, but fails again for the same reason: lack of mana. With no other alternatives at that moment, the only option left is to go to sleep. Time continues to pass, and now at 3 years of age, Alan still remains at level 2 of creation. Up to that point, he has managed to use synthesis only about 20 times. In one of these attempts, he mixes monsters and ends up creating a new rank G bird, with varied geographical distribution, which receives the name Chatpi. This creature has the ability to imitate sounds, which can be extremely useful to confuse enemies through voice. Next, he removes from storage Pianta, a frog with the ability to provoke opponents, functioning as an excellent lure. After that, he calls Mogusuk, a mole capable of digging tunnels, something very useful for traps and escapes. Alan becomes excited, because rank G summons are truly effective, and whoever masters the statistics of their summons can almost evolve on their own. Even so, when he ends up falling into one of Mogusuk's tunnels, he laments, realizing that he still has a long way to go before being able to face real monsters. At that moment, he remembers that it is already 3 in the afternoon, and that Kirina should arrive at any instant. And, as expected, she appears right after, calling him to play. Kirina is the neighbor's daughter and the same girl who usually beats him up while they play knights. Alan wonders where so much strength comes from, until he remembers the bonuses received because of his summons. Sometime later, we discover that Teresia is pregnant again. She asks Kirina to return home quickly, because it was getting late. The girl obeys, says goodbye, while Alan is left sprawled on the ground, completely exhausted. Shortly after, during dinner, Alan tells his father that he intends to help him. Since his mother's belly is getting bigger and bigger, his parents are surprised by that. Alan realizes that, even without using summons, his strength is already approaching that of an adult. Still, they reply that it is best for him to continue playing with Kirina, since he is still just a child, and that the day will come when he will need to help in the fields. Alan agrees, acknowledging that they are right. Since it is almost impossible to remove the serf status, he feels that he spoke prematurely and decides to keep playing for now. The parents then ask why he has been spending so much time throwing red cards against a tree. Alan answers that he had already explained before. If monsters appear near the house, he wants to be able to protect his mother. His father is moved upon hearing this, although, in truth, Alan was only testing whether he could unlock other abilities. At that point, Laudum comments that he is looking forward to the evaluation ritual, which happens when children turn 5 years old, the moment when the god of that world evaluates what gifts they possess and whether they are considered valuable. Depending on the gift, it might even be possible to escape life in the fields. Time passes once again, and when winter arrives, Alan thinks about returning to train his summons. However, Kirina appears and drags him to train with the sword, or rather, to get beaten again. His father arrives and mocks the situation. Then, his mother is startled upon seeing Denka and ends up falling to the ground. Alan acts quickly and hides the summon, but soon realizes that labor has begun. He helps by heating the water and warns his father, who becomes confused with everything happening at the same time. Fortunately, Matilda, Kirina's mother, arrives along with Gelda and her daughter. Matilda warns that the men need to leave and are expelled from the house. She takes control of the childbirth, and, at dawn, everyone wakes up to the baby's crying. Upon entering the room, Teresia tells Laudum that it is a boy. When they ask what name he wants to give the child, he chooses Masu. Teresia likes the name, but asks if he was also inspired by some monster. Laudum stands up angrily, but, to his surprise, Teresia simply laughs. Meanwhile, Alan wonders why he reincarnated in that world. He really wanted an extremely difficult game, something that demanded all his strength. His previous life was empty. No money, no diploma, no girlfriend. Nothing besides the desire to become stronger in a game, or at least that was the plan. His mother asks him to come closer, and upon touching his younger brother, Alan begins to cry. Teresia tells him not to worry, while Alan thinks that he still does not know how he will do it, but promises himself that he will free his parents from the serf status and take care of everything. As soon as Alan turns 5 years old, the moment of the evaluation ceremony arrives. On the way there, he asks his father how it works. Raiden explains that it is a special event in which everyone, from servants to nobles, must participate once they reach the age of 5. If they demonstrate any kind of talent, they can be freed from servitude. The only drawback is that there are many competitors. Since they settled in that land, people have been having children one after another, and now there are many children about to turn 5 years old, just like him. When Raiden finishes explaining, Krina, excited, asks if they will go together to the evaluation ceremony. Some time later, Krina shows her excitement upon arriving at the commoner's village and comments that if she is evaluated as a Chinese swordsman, she will become a knight. Alan looks at the people around him and realizes that some are very well dressed. He wonders if they are really commoners. Even so, it is surprising to see everyone participating in the ceremony at the same time. It is evident that some children are dressed better than others, something even a child can notice. As they walk, some people make comments about Alan's appearance, saying that he must be a servant because of his dark hair and eyes. Finally, 3 priests come out of the church before the ceremony begins and declare that me, the god of creation, blesses everyone equally with great opportunities. The country has already seen heroes whose lineage can be traced back to servitude. As examples, they mention Classy Santa, who was born a commoner, and Durf, the Lord of the Sword, who also had humble origins. Alan remembers that, in the game, classes such as Hero or Lord of the Sword could only be obtained by people from lower social classes. That seemed to be just a game setting, but it clearly applied to that world. This explains why everyone, from the top to the bottom, needs to go through the ceremony. Everyone enters the evaluation site and observes the statues of the gods worshipped in that world. Alan recognizes the central statue as me, the god of creation, the same entity who sent him the letter. When the ceremony begins, the priests announce that they will start with the village chief's son, Boji Palomas. They ask him to place his hand on the crystal ball and explain that any talent or attribute will be recorded on the metal plate behind him. The boy follows the instructions, and as soon as he touches the crystal ball, his statistics appear on the plate. Alan realizes that it is very similar to the status screen of his grimoire. The boy shows talent as a merchant, which makes his father extremely happy. He hugs him proudly and even cries with emotion. Alan realizes that having any talent at all is already a reason for celebration. The information is displayed with rankings instead of numbers, and Alan confirms this by checking his grimoire, satisfied to know that no one besides him can see it. As the ceremony continues, Alan learns that not everyone has talent, which makes it even more valuable to obtain one. Next, a boy named Doroga steps forward and reveals talent as an axe user. Alan is surprised, as it is the first A-rank talent to appear. This indicates that it is possible to reach high positions without belonging to the nobility. When almost everyone has already been evaluated, it is Krina's turn. She runs excitedly toward the crystal ball, curious to discover her talent. As soon as she touches the object, it begins to shine intensely, leaving everyone speechless. Those present are shocked as they witness the miracle. Krina possesses the talent of Lord of the Sword, one of the rarest and most powerful that exist. The guard proudly announces that his daughter has obtained the best possible talent. However, Krina feels a little disappointed, because she wanted to be a Chinese swordsman. For Alan, however, this is no surprise, since that talent explains just how absurdly strong she is. Finally, it is Alan's turn. His parents wait anxiously to discover what his talent is. When he places his hand on the crystal ball, the glow is even more intense than before. Raiden immediately approaches to check if everything is all right, and Alan comments that Krina had already caused something even more impressive. When they try to read the plate, Raiden explains to the priest that they cannot read and asks him to inform them of Alan's talent. The priest agrees, but all the excitement disappears when he states that Alan has no talent at all. For a moment, Alan almost panics, but soon realizes that something is wrong. He carefully observes the metal plate and notices that, in the space where the talent should appear, there is only a writing error. This irritates him because it is clearly a bug. He even ends up blaming the god of creation, thinking that he should learn to balance the game better, since now no one will know that he is a summoner. Even so, Raiden takes Alan back home, where his mother is waiting. During dinner, his father says that talent is not everything, and that, regardless of that, Alan will always be his pride. Teresa agrees, and Alan realizes that, despite being very poor and not even having a bathtub, he is happy to have been born into that family. At night, Alan consults his grimoire and realizes that all of his attributes are extremely high. He understands, then, at least one thing: he is the only one in that world who is playing on Hell mode. All the children at the ceremony were 5 years old, which means they should be at the same level. However, the ranking system likely reflects the expected growth at each level. That would explain why everyone has E-rank attributes, while progress in Hell mode amounts to only 1/100th of the normal rate. Considering these intervals, the displayed values represent only a fraction of the real ones, making ordinary people much weaker than they appear. He was pulling his hair out or yanking it, imagining this somewhere far above. But reality came crashing down to put an end to mediocre games in his place. Now, his time would be spent proving that hardcore mode is amazing. He is 30 years old, so it is normal to think that way. Even so, that strange detail in the evaluation ceremony was clearly an error, and the developers would need to fix it. Because of that, he would certainly complain and drown them in a sea of letters. After all, they could not underestimate a player who had no life. Time passes, and one day Alan notices that his father is behaving in a strange way. That, by itself, would not be so unusual, but this time it was different, more worrying. It was not just his usual odd behavior, but something abnormal even for him. His mother comments that he had been like that ever since he arrived home late the previous night. Shortly afterward, they go to Gerda's house to celebrate the fact that Krina is now a Lady of the Sword. Upon arriving there, Krina excitedly tells Alan that the talent of Lord of the Sword is even better than that of Chinese Sword, so now she will become even stronger. Alan pretends to be surprised, saying that he cannot believe it, even though he already knew. He comments that, even before that, she already defeated him effortlessly, because she was just that strong. Matilda mentions that the village chief stopped by and left a bottle of alcohol to celebrate, allowing them to open it. However, Rodden maintains a resentful attitude as he congratulates them, saying that they can enjoy the alcohol. Gerda responds in the same way, stating that in that house the guests drink first. Alan begins to wonder if his father feels jealous of Krina's talent, but soon dismisses that idea, since Rodden is not like that. There must be another reason. Rodden tries to serve the first cup, but Gerda says that she will not drink anything if he keeps that bitter expression. She asks him to stop ruining the mood. Suddenly, Rodden smashes the bottle on the floor and says that he is happy that Krina has an incredible talent, something that truly deserves to be celebrated. Then, Gerda asks why he said that he would cut ties with the family. This revelation leaves everyone in shock. Rodden explains that it is not because he wants to, but because Krina's talent is extraordinary. She will be able to join the cavalry to serve the country, and there is even the possibility that she may become a noble. People like that should not waste time socializing with servants. At that moment, Alan realizes that his father was trying to do a favor that no one asked for. Rodden insists that being a lady of the sword is something very important, but Gerda coldly replies that it makes no difference. Tired of the argument, Alan asks Krina to intervene, believing that this might calm them down. Krina immediately draws her wooden sword, ready to act. But before she can do anything, Matilda and Teresa take control of the situation. The contrast between the personalities of the two women becomes clear. Teresa merely pinches her husband's cheeks in a controlled manner, while Matilda simply beats him up, resembling a scene from The Incredibles, where the characters fight during dinner. After everyone finally calms down, Alan asks Matilda if they were always like that. She replies that parenthood made them a little calmer, because before that they would trade punches without thinking twice. Teresa smiles as she reminisces about the old days and says that, in fact, the four of them are childhood friends and grew up together in the same village. Matilda explains that, about 10 years ago, a rumor began to spread that a new village would be founded, and they decided to participate in the project together. They talked as a group about working side by side to build their own houses, which explains why both have the same design. Rodden comments that, with more people, it was easier to build two houses at the same time, considering the labor and the materials. Gerda adds that she was the one who raised the support beams, while Rodden was responsible for the walls and the floors. Then, she continues pouring the drink and says that she also took care of the roof. In short, Rodden mentions that he has not drunk sake since the day of the wedding, and Gerda says that the same goes for her. Both Rodden and Gerda usually feel sick after drinking, but the next day they continue working as usual. The following morning, someone informs Gerda that the Order of Knights has arrived to see Krina. Shortly afterward, Rodden and Gerda head to the commoner's village with their children, while many other people gather around to watch. Alan comments that it seems the news that Krina is a lady of the sword has already spread. Suddenly, Daroga approaches Krina and Alan. Alan recognizes him as the boy from the evaluation ceremony. He is already displaying his talent as an axe user, holding a large haft. Daroga asks what Alan is doing there and says that talentless losers have no place in that location. Before Alan can respond, Kino steps forward to defend him, stating that he is there because he is strong. Daroga does not believe it and reminds him of Alan's rankings, mocking him. Ken tries to attack him, but his father quickly holds him back to restrain him. The village chief then announces that the Order of Knights has arrived and asks everyone to make way. Everyone recognizes the captain, a master swordsman named Zenoff. Krina becomes extremely excited to finally see real knights. 3 years have passed since she and Alan used to play at being knights, and now she sees them for real. Krina enthusiastically introduces herself to the captain. Alan asks if she will now leave the village to become a knight. Gerda quickly explains to Zenoff that her daughter is only 5 years old and has never wielded a real sword, so she would have no chance at all. Zenoff does not see that as a problem, because in the end, she is still a lady of the sword. The only problem would be if everything were a lie to deceive the man named Grainel. Gerda nervously denies it, and then Zenoff turns to the vice captain, allowing no protest. The captain realizes that something is wrong, and Zenoff warns them that falsifying the results of the evaluation ceremony is punishable by death. Therefore, they need to confirm whether Krina's talent as a lady of the sword is legitimate. To do that, a fencing duel will be held. Gerda begs for mercy, as her daughter's life is at risk, but Zenoff states that if she does not fight, she will be executed along with the entire family at the lake. Alan did not expect something so extreme and wonders if those people have completely lost their minds. Everyone around them becomes tense and worried. However, the moment Krina sees a real sword for the first time, She immediately runs toward it and asks if she can use it. Krina accepts the challenge and faces Leberand, the vice captain of the knights, surprising everyone by wielding a massive sword with great precision. Even though she is only a child, she withstands the attacks of an experienced adult, causing despair in her parents and indignation in Alan as he watches the excessive force being used against her. After being thrown against the wall, Krina gets back up and releases an intense pressure, revealing a special ability that makes her superior to Leberand. With a final strike, she splits the vice captain's sword in half, proving that she could have killed him. The duel comes to an end, and Leberand acknowledges his defeat, praising Krina's strength. The crowd applauds, and there is no longer any doubt that she is a true lady of the sword. Zinnov accepts the result, apologizes for his previous attitude, and congratulates Gerda on raising such a daughter. Later on, everyone gathers for a dinner, where Zinnov introduces himself as the captain of the knights and explains that he was sent to confirm the existence of a Lord of the Sword in the region. Impressed, he reveals that the village will be renamed in honor of Krina and asks Gerda to continue training her daughter, so that, in the future, she can study at the academy and serve the royal family. During the dinner, Rodden also receives recognition for his work as a hunter, and the episode ends on a light note, with family moments and a relaxed atmosphere. Sometime later, Alan celebrates the fact that, thanks to recent events, he has finally managed to improve his summoning skill. He immediately opens the grimoire and, upon checking the statistics, realizes that he now possesses the enhanced version of the skill, which means that his summons can become more powerful. In addition, F-rank creatures have been unlocked, something he already expected, although he still needs to work with them to obtain new ones, just as he did with Chappie. Alan becomes excited to discover what the next unlocked type will be and truly hopes that it will be something intimidating, such as a dragon. To make things even better, his card stock increased from 20 to 30, which means that he will be able to receive 1.5 times more additional enhancements. A full 2 years have passed since the last time his summoning skill leveled up, so he knows that he will still have to experience many things from now on. At night, Alan offers to wash the dishes, since Teresa is expecting another baby. In this marriage, they do not waste time, and he knows that his wife needs to rest. In truth, Alan also just wants to finish his chores quickly so he can test his new ability. Mash asks his mother if they will have another little sibling, but his father explains that it could be either a brother or a sister. Teresa comments that the kicks are very gentle, which gives her the feeling that, this time, it will be a girl. Rodden says that he already needs to start thinking about names, but Teresa reminds him that he promised she would have the right to choose the girls' names. While Teresa tries to think of a name, Alan notices that his magic points are being replenished again. He checks his glyph and sees a message from Me, the goddess of creation. By accident, he ends up reading the name out loud, which surprises his parents. Rodden immediately scolds him, warning that he should not take the Lord's name in vain. Derisha comments that Alan has been acting strangely all day. Alan quickly tries to cover it up, pretending ignorance, and blames the unfortunate timing and the developers for what happened. He then completely changes the subject and comments to his father that the scar on his arm is visible again. Rodden then explains that this happened because he overcame a test from the gods during the boar hunt that day. It is a special moment that occurs occasionally, usually when someone gets married, and it causes a sudden wave of energy that heals all wounds and removes fatigue. Alan pretends not to know anything, but looks excited, assuming that this is simply how it works. That is how the act of leveling up is described in that world. Rodden is a seasoned veteran in boar hunts, and even though Alan cannot see his statistics, he bets that his father must have a very high level. Despite his summoning skill having increased, Alan remains only at level 1 and has never defeated monsters beyond the weakest ones. In addition, servants cannot leave the village without permission, and the only exception is their own home. Because of this, Alan decides to ask to participate in a hunt, but his father immediately refuses, saying that the forest is no joke and that danger can cost lives. Alan does not argue any further. That night, he decides to check the grimoire again to reread Me's message. Although he already knows what it is about, After all, he had sent some rather toxic complaints, as expected. The defective text of the evaluation ceremony was finally corrected. The message also explains why his statistics appeared as E rank. This happened due to the slower level increase in Hell mode. As compensation, an attached file with the raw data was sent. Alan decides to analyze the attachment immediately and discovers that his true classification is focused on magic points and intelligence, which makes total sense for a summoner. He has the same number of A, B, and C rankings as Krina, so there is nothing to complain about. In the end, it seems like a fair reward for all the effort. Without wasting any more time, Alan decides to test the enhancements. He starts by improving Denka, and the skill immediately increases the creature's own statistics. Exactly as he suspected, the enhancements do not affect Alan's personal attributes, only those of the summoned creatures. To confirm this, Alan summons Denk. His appearance remains the same, although he is now clearly stronger. This shows that being a summoner is a great advantage. It is not just about summoning large and terrifying monsters, but about strategically enhancing the ones you already have. Alan is quite enthusiastic, but suddenly Teresa enters the room and panics when she sees Denka. Before Alan can stop her, his mother steps on the creature without hesitation. He begins to experiment with all possible fusion combinations, but realizes that he still has not unlocked a new type. The only remaining possibility is to fuse an F-class insect with an AB-ranked creature, also of F-class. When experimenting with fusions, he manages to create a new type of creature, a grass card, class F. Despite the initial disappointment, Alan realizes that it grants an increase in magic points. When he summons it, an apple with arms and legs appears, called a Po, whose aroma ability causes a plant to sprout that releases a pleasant smell. Later, Alan discovers that this aroma reduces the recovery time of his magic points, increasing his daily efficiency. Training with Krina, Alan loses as always, but she notices that he has become stronger. When consulting the grimoire, he confirms that his swordsmanship mastery has increased. Even so, he feels frustrated for not being able to evolve certain skills, insisting on repetitive training while trying to balance responsibilities with his family. At night, Rodden takes a long time to return and is soon brought back seriously injured after a boar hunt. He survives thanks to a rare herb and the gold coins received as compensation from the captain of the knights. Gerda explains that the accident occurred because unprepared commoners panicked, forcing Rodden to save them. Despite the severity, Rodden recovers and shows greatness by forgiving the one responsible. Feeling useless, Alan decides to stop pretending weakness and act to protect his family, fully investing in physical strength. Inspired by his parents, he tries to secure food for the winter using his summoner abilities, but ends up attracting a dangerous Albajaran, a rank B monster. Even with his evolved ability, Alan is defeated along with his summons and realizes the great disadvantage of losing the bonuses when summoning them. Fearing that this might be his end. Closing episode 3. When he hits the ground, the protagonist understands that he needs to think quickly to get out of that complicated situation as soon as possible. Without wasting time, he decides to summon one of his monsters to assist him. By grabbing the creature by the neck, he realizes that he had never put this ability into practice before, but he notices that it works very well to drain energy. Observing more closely, he sees that the beast is already visibly weakened, the result of the great consumption of summoning power during the fight. Even so, this would not be a problem if he could just immobilize the creature that was in front of him. Then, he summons all of his remaining monsters to attack together, and, with a decisive blow, he finally manages to defeat the monster before him. When he looks at the book, he realizes that he received plus 100 experience. Soon after, he begins to celebrate, because he had defeated his first monster. This achievement leaves him extremely excited. Upon returning home, he takes with him the monster he has just defeated. Everyone begins to wonder how he managed to defeat an Albanes. The boy's mother asks how he was able to defeat that creature. He replies that it is a long story and that everything happened suddenly. The people around him become curious, trying to understand whether that was true. The boy's friend becomes very happy when she realizes that he is getting stronger and stronger. One of the men notices a wound on his cheek and asks if he was injured anywhere else. The boy replies that the bleeding had already stopped, so there was no reason for concern at that moment. The man asks if he brought down the beast using stones and a sword. Alan answers that yes. The old man, however, is surprised when he notices several marks that resemble wolf attacks. Alan makes up an excuse, saying that he fought purely on instinct and that he does not even really know how he managed to do that. Next, the man asks Alan for help. Together, they carry the beast to a more secluded place. The man explains that this type of creature usually weighs around 60 kilograms. Then, he explains that after removing feathers, blood, and organs, approximately 20 kilograms of meat suitable for consumption remain. In addition, the feathers also have good resale value. Alan becomes very happy when he realizes that his uncle is willing to teach him everything he knows. However, he explains that, even so, most of the profit must be handed over to the upper class. The 60% tax applies even to wild monsters. Then, he decides to show the boy something, opens the creature's body, and removes a stone, explaining that it is rank D. The man says that magic stones from monsters above rank D are also subject to taxation. He adds that, for the village, these stones have no use. Even so, he asks Alan not to continue hunting in the forest while his father is injured. Still, he gives him a tip. It would be possible to negotiate that bird with a higher-ranking chief. Alan approaches the man and talks with him at length. The scene then shifts to both of them in the royal capital. The man explains that the boy worked very hard to capture that beast, that all the feathers have already been handed over as tax payment, and asks whether the value of the meat could remain entirely with him. The other man asks him to wait a moment. He tries to harden the negotiation, saying that the Baron is demanding more and more meat, which causes almost everything to be taxed. Realizing that Alan was not an easy negotiator, he is impressed. Then, Alan also offers a magic stone. Both of them start an argument so that the boy could keep the stone, since he was still just a child hunting monsters. With few options, the man accepts and allows Alan to keep the magic stone. The boy becomes very happy, thanks him for the help, and realizes how skilled his uncle is at negotiations. Alan asks if, in the future, they could deliver only the magic stones and keep the meat. The man explains that if they always obtain magic stones, they will be able to keep the meat, wishing them good luck. After deceiving the fat old man, Alan decides to carry out a few more hunts. Using one of his frogs to draw the attention of the birds, he summons his monsters to drain the energy of the beasts, weakening them until the moment of the final blow. With stones, he strikes the creatures' heads and uses his dogs to finish the fight. After leaving the monsters disoriented, Alan delivers the final blow, eliminating them with ease. After winning, he feels very satisfied and orders his summons to return to the grimoire. When he opens it, he realizes that he has been hunting every 3 days since the first victory. But that was the first time he had not lost any summons in combat. Upon reaching 1000 experience, he finally levels up to level 2. The boy now has good skills, but his attribute increases represent only 60% of the expected total. He realizes that he is still not using the full potential of his abilities. Soon after, he ends up leveling up again and becomes very happy. After 6 years summoning creatures and going through so many hardships, he finally reached his first level. He feels fulfilled for having overcome a trial imposed by a god. Alan thinks that perhaps it is time to tell his family about his abilities. The scene changes to Alan arriving home with a huge monster, leaving one of his uncles shocked to learn that he defeated the creature alone. Later, he goes to train with his childhood friend. He reflects that he has already defeated 10 monsters and that his luck is improving. If he continues like this, there will be enough meat to get through the winter without worries. What is missing now is to trade part of the meat for firewood. Since there are many albatrosses in the region, he thinks about hunting more and, who knows, reaching level 3. He knows that this will be difficult before the end of the year. Distracted, he ends up being defeated by his friend during training. At nightfall, he decides to talk to his parents about his powers. Alan explains that he heard from an oracle when he was small that he was stronger and more intelligent than ordinary children. His mother asks if it was Elmia, and Alan confirms. However, he would also have to face challenges that an ordinary man would never face. The mother becomes worried about her son, His father, in turn, asks if he managed to overcome the trials of that day. Since the wound on his cheek had disappeared quickly, he explains that he himself had also gone through tests from the gods and knew that this would one day happen to his son. The mother asks about the evaluation from the previous year. Alan replies that he received a message from the goddess apologizing for the mistake. The father only asks that he show more respect. Alan apologizes and promises to be more careful. He explains that his attributes were evaluated as low because his tests have slow progression, and that his talent was considered non-existent because it was still too recent to be identified. The father asks if he has any talent. Alan replies that he still does not know, because he is very young and it has not manifested yet. The father becomes a little sad. In his thoughts, Alan apologizes for not being able to reveal his summoning talent. He fears that people would misinterpret it if they discovered that he can summon and control creatures. And, of course, he cannot tell anyone that he reincarnated from another world. The mother wraps him in a hug and says that she wishes he had told them all of this earlier. The boy's habit of throwing stones at trees every day and now facing giant monsters makes her ask if that was because of the Lord's trials. Alan apologizes for not speaking sooner. The father asks what he intends to do in the face of this. Alan explains that he wants to prove that he is worthy by passing the trials. In addition, he has always liked facing his problems head-on. The father understands what the boy means. Now he realizes that the goddess Elmia prepared this challenge especially for him. He knows that it is worth being accepted, and if he faces difficulties, he asks him to never hesitate to tell them everything. Alan thanks his parents for their support. The father asks that this story remain only among them, because he knows that telling this to other people could end up causing problems. Even so, he would like to tell Jerd, and the boy allows it. He knows that Jerd is always bragging that the girl is the sword lord and all that. Now he will be able to say that his son has a power comparable to hers. As time passes, winter finally arrives, and Alan begins to separate the meat to cut it. Suddenly, his uncle appears at the place, saying that he always knew that Alan was never an ordinary child. However, being blessed and tested by a god is another story altogether. He comments that this explains many things. The two head to the capital to sell part of the meat. The man asks if it is Alan's first time negotiating food, and he replies that it is, asking his uncle for help. The man decides to assist him. He explains that things work better when it is only among them, without commoners to get in the way. Alan asks what the real difference is between them and the commoners. The man replies that this is linked to their current social position. In addition, the 60% tax does not apply to nobles, because they pay in another way. He also explains that if a person has a child, nobles pay 1 to 3 coins, while commoners pay around 50 coins. Upon arriving at the shops, Alan learns to trade his meat for salt, sugar, vegetables, and other products. When he returns home, he is satisfied to realize that a bundle of dried meat was exchanged for enough firewood for 4 days. Now that he better understands how trading works, he can research more the next time he goes to the market. When he returns to the place, he asks the man how much it would cost if he paid with coins, and he replies that it would be 5 silver coins. In his mind, Alan knows that he cannot be a salt seller without having a salty attitude. When he enters a medicine shop, Alan asks if the man has any medicine that restores MP. The merchant replies that he does not deal with such expensive medicines. He explains that he only sells healing potions. Alan then asks if he has the Mueller's flour. The man replies that he does not, and that even if he did, he would not sell it. Alan asks if it was the same flour that Gerda bought. The man confirms, saying that she always enters the shop wanting the most expensive medicines. In addition, he comments that she is very clever. By always asking for the cheapest items, she ended up offering 3 gold coins and even asked to pay later. He says that she is more persistent than a child in a candy shop. The boy decides to give something to the man. He asks if he wants to trade it for anything. Alan replies that no, he is giving it as a thank you, because by selling that herb, he ended up saving his father's life. When he leaves the place, Alan meets a boy who asks what he is doing looking at his father's shop products. Alan replies that it is nothing and turns his back, but ends up being attacked. He draws his sword, and the boy runs away. but soon returns with a sword. Alan easily dodges and realizes that he is nothing special, being much weaker than his friend. A few days later, the father arrives home later and explains that the chief wants to talk to them. The man says that the chief wants to increase the number of boars delivered to the Baron to something between 10 and 15. For that, they want common people to help as well this year. The mother thinks it is unfair since her husband is injured. He explains that the orders came directly from the Baron. If they do not comply, they will hire more servants from other regions. Alan understands that if this happens, they will lose even more land. In addition, servants who do not know how to hunt may end up having their land taken away. This could completely change the nature of the village of Krina. To make matters worse, next year they want them to hunt 20 boars. The only way to achieve this is by increasing the hunting days to once every 2 days. Alan explains that if they increase the number of people working even more, they will continue getting injured, and over the years, this will become impossible. The final result would be recruiting new members, and the father knows that this is true. He asks if Alan thinks it is better to let the commoners help as well, and Alan replies that yes. The boy's uncle says that they are nothing but dead weight. Alan explains that he needs to find a way to make everyone useful. In addition, he has the wisdom that was granted to him. On the next day, everyone stands before a base, and thus the episode ends. Suddenly, they receive the news that the people have finally arrived. A sense of relief immediately spreads among everyone. The tension that had built up over the past few days almost completely disappears when they confirm that Rodden has managed to recover. Many let out sighs of relief, some even smiling for the first time in a long while. Rodden, still looking a bit worn out, apologizes for having worried everyone and assures them that, despite the incident, he is in great shape and ready to return to action. They then ask whether Alan will be going along this time. Rodden explains that, for now, they will follow the strategy devised by Alan, but that he will participate only as an observer. Alan agrees, saying that he does not intend to get in anyone's way. Even while trying to appear calm, the boy is visibly downcast on the inside. He truly wanted to go into battle and prove his worth, but he knows his father is extremely stubborn and will not give in easily. Although he recognizes that this decision is not good for his growth, he accepts the situation. At the moment, the most important thing is to ensure that the novices are properly trained, helping the group hunt more boars without risks. No one wants anyone to get hurt again. Shortly afterward, the people who had caused Rodden's injuries appear. Ashamed, they apologize, admitting that they were reckless and irresponsible. They say they do not want Rodden to worry about them, and even claim that, if a monster attacks them again, they would rather be left to die. Rodden reacts immediately, saying that he does not want to hear that kind of talk. He makes it clear that all he wants is for everyone to take care of themselves and reinforces that, whenever they need help, they only need to ask. Alan reflects that this was already his 7th year living as a servant. At last, the moment to leave the village was drawing closer. A small step forward, but an important one. Before him rise the White Dragon Mountains, imposing and shrouded in an almost mystical aura. Every autumn, the boars descend from the foothills of the mountains in search of food, becoming the main targets of the hunts. Legends say that a mythical white dragon lives hidden somewhere at the summit. Just thinking about it already excites the group, as if the very atmosphere were charged with fantasy. Suddenly, Alan is called to keep up with the group and not fall behind. The scene cuts to the battlefield, where everyone is already in position and ready to fight. A giant boar emerges from within the forest and attacks violently. In perfect synchrony, the group uses the giant sword to halt the beast's advance. Shortly after, Rodden's team appears from the rear. With a coordinated attack, they manage to severely wound the monster. Throughout the entire fight, Alan only observes attentively. It is explained that the method works as follows. The bait team lures the boar. The tank team keeps the monster in place. And finally, the attack team strikes its vital points. This is the method that his father and the others have used for more than 10 years, allowing for successful hunts even without special talents. Alan comments that it is almost time to attack and asks his friends to be ready to help. Even so, he feels a growing frustration at having to rely on weak people to hold anything on the battlefield. Soon after, they move into action. Rodden warns everyone to be careful and not to hit someone by mistake. Watching from afar, Alan knows that a single battle is enough for everyone to gain experience. Rodden then orders everyone to attack together, and the boar is defeated with a single devastating blow. Alan wonders if he gained anything from that. When he checks his log, he realizes that he did not receive any experience, which makes sense since he did not directly participate in the fight. Shortly afterward, the same boys he had trained appear, thanking him and saying that his advice made all the difference. Even so, in Alan's mind remains the frustration of having been only an observer, leaving a bitter taste of defeat. The next day, the group asks whether Alan will go hunting again. He answers yes, but adds that he would like them to ask his father for permission to use a spear. Everyone immediately refuses, saying that Rodden would beat them up if they dared make such a request. Without wasting time, Alan calls a friend to help him process the monsters that were already dead, properly cutting the parts and separating them. In exchange, he offers 2 packages as payment, and the man accepts without hesitation. Alan explains that those monsters are not part of the official reserves and that proper cutting is essential to sell the meat. He knows he needs to gather 50 gold coins to free his family from servitude. Taking everything to a city butcher would be far too expensive, so outsourcing the work right there is the best option, saving both time and money. He needs to make use of every moment. Later, the group discusses the possibility of forming 2 teams to capture even more boars. The scene cuts to them already inside the forest. One of them draws the monster's attention and runs to warn the others. Everyone gathers quickly and defeats the boar with a single blow. When he looks at his book again, Alan realizes that this time he gained experience. Before the fight, it is explained that his creatures can be summoned in any location he can visually mark within a radius of 50 meters. If the boar attacks one of these creatures, that already counts him as a participant in the battle. Anything goes when it comes to this. That is the mindset of a true hardcore gamer. The story advances 3 months. Alan explains that this world celebrates the beginning of the new year, and because of that, he was invited, for the first time, to the residence of the village chief, perhaps as a reward for having defeated 15 boars. Everyone celebrates the achievement, and he knows that, by keeping this pace, reaching 20 boars that year will be easy, all thanks to his plan to train the novices. During the celebration, someone notices a bottle behind Alan and believes it to be something special. He explains that it is a liquor he received from the chief. Everyone is impressed by something so expensive. Alan knows, however, that he deceived everyone with that lie. When they ask to drink the liquor, Alan agrees, but sets a condition. They must defeat him in a duel. If they win, the bottle is theirs. Otherwise, he wants permission to use a spear on the battlefield that year. Everyone is shocked when they realize they have fallen into the boys' trap. Even so, they accept the challenge and ask what the competition will be. Alan chooses an arm wrestling match. The first opponent, a large and strong man, starts out dominating, but Alan manages to turn the match around and win in the end. Next, he faces his own father. When he grips his father's calloused hands, he feels his crushing strength. Raid smiles, happy to realize that his son can already compete with him. But even so, he still wins with ease. Alan accepts the defeat, aware that the other man's power is between 150 and 200, rank D, while his father's ranges between 250 and 300, rank C. After drinking more than they should, Gerda ends up getting hit by his wife and is left hanging upside down, drawing laughter from everyone. Alan watches the scene and is impressed, realizing that she must also be rank C. The scene shifts to 6 months later. Alan clearly feels that his level has finally increased and receives a flood of new information. It is too much to process all at once, so he decides to calmly check his statistics page. In addition, he unlocks rank E summoning creatures. He will need to fuse them again to discover the final result. But now he has enough MP to experiment without restrictions. His card inventory has also increased, now able to hold 10 units. The bonuses granted by summoned creatures grow according to their level, so he imagines that he could receive a considerable boost if he manages to fill the inventory with 40 rank E cards. Thinking about that, he believes that he might now be able to defeat his own father in an arm wrestling match. Soon after, he realizes that he has acquired a new ability related to storage. Upon closer inspection, he notices that there is no level indicator next to the skill, which makes him wonder if it could be a fixed ability. While investigating, he notices the existence of an empty space, as if it were a hole. When he puts his hand in, he feels that it is extremely deep. Curious, he throws a stone and realizes that it does not hit the bottom. By concentrating more, he is able to mentally visualize the objects he stored in that space. After throwing several stones inside, he decides to test the limits of the ability and discovers that he can store anything that fits inside the book. He remembers that, in many games, item carrying capacity is an essential factor for player progression. Because of that, he begins to wonder if he received a divine storage ability at precisely that moment. Whether it is a key, a boat, or even a magic carpet, items tend to appear when they are truly needed. He feels that there is a greater reason behind this, something that will eventually require this ability. Next, he decides to test the rank E summons, but realizes that nothing happens. He wonders if perhaps he does not have enough MP, even though he has just recovered his energy. Shortly after, a message appears informing him that he does not have enough magic stones to create a rank E insect. Determined, he goes to his room and grabs all the money pouches he had stored. When he tries to use a stone, he receives another message and realizes that it still did not work. Then, he decides to use the storage ability. After throwing the stone into the space, he finally manages to perform the summoning and creates a butterfly. He spends some time playing with the creature, extremely happy with the result. Days later, he manages to create a saber-toothed tiger, which leaves him even more satisfied. Excited, he performs yet another fusion between creatures. The scene changes to the following day. As he looks around, the boy realizes that even small monsters can pose a danger to children. Turning to a friend, he asks for more details about magic stones. The friend explains that these stones are small gems located inside monsters, usually near the heart, and are mainly used to power magical tools. Magical tools are objects that function when they receive energy from these stones. There are many different types of them in the capital of the kingdom. Rank D and C stones have great value for the capital's residents, while rank E stones are practically disposable, often found scattered across the ground. Upon hearing this, the boy begins to look around and finds several of these stones. Alan decides that he will search for more in the surroundings of the village. After some time, he manages to gather many magic stones with the help of the villagers. Soon after, he imagines a situation in which several boars attack him, but together with his creatures he manages to defeat the beasts. However, he soon realizes that this is nothing more than a dream. When he wakes up, he concludes that each type of summon was created to fulfill a specific function in combat, such as attack, defense, weakening, healing, and detection. Thanks to this, he can single-handedly fulfill the role of an entire group of adventurers, which defines a truly efficient summoner. He also understands why he received the storage ability at that moment. Without it, it would be impossible to carry hundreds of magic stones with him. Now he believes he understands the intentions of the creators of this system. With an unparalleled army of creatures at his side, he feels that he can overcome any challenge and defeat any enemy. Thus ends another episode. As soon as they arrived at the noble's residence, they were received with a direct question: what did they want this time? They explained that, according to the new decision, the Baron would begin visiting the region every month. The master of the house was surprised by the news. Then they added that, in order to meet the requirements of the visit, it would be necessary to slaughter around 20 boars. He then wanted to know why they specifically needed Alan. The noble decided to clarify the situation. He said they needed someone capable of acting as the Baron's guide during his stay. They questioned why his own son could not take on that role. The man replied that Paloma's was not suitable for the task. Alan understood immediately. Deep down, he knew that it was true. He agreed without resistance. The noble explained that he expected Alan to help demonstrate hospitality, beginning with a dinner before the hunt. Alan realized that the intention was to entertain him and please him, perhaps even win him over with small courtesies. Even so, he made it clear that he would not be easy to manipulate. The noble had heard comments that Alan's ideas had contributed to the success of the hunts the previous year. He was confident that the boy would be able to handle that responsibility. In Alan's thoughts, however, he cared little about the Baron. The reality was that, as a serf, he did not have many options to leave the village. If he continued merely hunting boars and albatrosses, it would take at least 10 years to reach the status of commoner. The boy's father explained that, if he refused, there would be no problem. Alan remembered something important. The Baron had the authority to grant the title of commoner. That could be his chance to rise in the social hierarchy. After reflecting, he decided to accept the role of guide. On the day of the Baron's arrival, the city was restless. Nobles made a point of flattering him. His daughter, Sissel, was also present. The Baron thanked Deboki for the work carried out over more than 15 years to establish Krina village. Ever since the land reclamation decree, he said that, throughout the entire Grinvel fief, there was no greater example of success. He apologized for the confusion involving the boar meat. He knew that the extra request was troublesome, but he could not refuse a direct order from the king. The host was shocked to learn that the request came from His Majesty himself. Irritated, he blamed Viscount Carmel for having mentioned the hunts before the king. The butler advised him to calm down and taste the meal. Upon trying the dish, he was surprised by the flavor and asked what kind of meat it was. Not knowing how to respond, the host remained silent until Alan asked for permission to speak. He explained that it was a dish from Albahiron, prepared with meat slaughtered the previous day. They had used breast, thigh, and liver, seasoned with fresh herbs. The Baron asked whether the boy was the host's son. He replied that he was not, that Alan was a separate case. Someone at the table recalled that he was Rodden's son, the hunter. Alan thanked them for recognizing his face and informed them that he would be the guide on that occasion. The Baron was impressed by his manners and asked whether his father had been a knight. The host explained that he came from a family of serfs. Sissel showed irritation and questioned why they had allowed a serf to be present in the house. Her father immediately reprimanded her, asking her not to treat anyone that way. Even so, she continued to stare at Alan with displeasure. The Baron called the boy and asked whether he was prepared to present the details of the following day's hunt. Alan promptly agreed. The man explained that, if they did not reach the mark of 20 boars, his knights would take the front line. Alan realized that he did not fully trust the serfs. Cecil, on the other hand, became excited at the idea of seeing knights slaughtering boars. Alan apologized, but stated that 20 boars were a small number for them. Everyone was surprised to hear that coming from a child. He assured them that they would meet the target and that their performance would speak for itself. Before departing, the Baron asked Zinnov to take care of his son and keep everyone safe. Zinnov accepted without hesitation. At the camp, Alan indicated the hunting location and suggested that they climb the tower to observe the area. Cecil was impressed by the view. He explained that that was the forest where they faced the boars. Soon after, they were informed that the hunters had arrived. Alan commented that the armor being used had been produced from scraps of hide, bones, and tusks from previous hunts, and asked that they convey thanks for the authorization. On behalf of his father, Rodden, he explained that the strategy consisted of attracting the boars into the hunting zone. Speed was essential, which was why they used light equipment. He asked for patience, as it might take some time before the animals appeared. The Baron was impressed and remarked that he would send a tutor the following spring to help Alan study for the academy entrance examination. The boy understood, but he knew that, in the reality of Krina, studying was something distant. Suddenly, a man appeared running, chased by a boar. He and his group raised their shields to protect themselves. Then they used spears to wound the creature, and Rodden appeared to deliver the final blow. Everyone was impressed by the group's coordination. Even without great individual strength, they worked together and considered themselves worthy of being called warriors. Soon after, 2 boars appeared. Some suggested calling the guards, but Alan asked them to wait. He explained that the hunters were trained for that type of situation. In his thoughts, he believed that every creature lured in should be killed. Letting one escape was wasteful. However, in the past 10 years, he and his father had not managed to eliminate all the animals, mainly due to the lack of proper armor. 60% of the meat was collected as tax, and the remainder had to be exchanged for basic items. The spears were the only equipment they could improve. Even so, by mastering efficient strategies, they were gradually able to enhance their resources. After observing the difficulty of the confrontation, someone commented that 17 boars were still missing. Alan corrected them. Only 10 remained. 7 had already been slaughtered at the end of the previous year. He believed they would reach the target before the following month. The Baron was impressed and concluded that his knights would not be necessary. Alan gave thanks, imagining that his father would be pleased. Then he made 2 requests. The first was authorization to construct 2 shield walls. The Baron asked whether that was for the next hunt or already in preparation for the following year. He then asked if Alan needed anything else. As his second request, the boy asked for permission to acquire goods that were not available in the village, especially alcoholic beverages. He explained that he wished to trade them and allow their distribution among the servants. The man questioned the reason. Alan clarified that, with the increase in the number of boars being slaughtered, there was a real concern that the abundance of meat might reduce the value of the village's products. Exchanging part of the meat for imported drinks would help prevent a possible collapse in the local market. Furthermore, he emphasized that the hunters risked their own lives to be effective. The man understood. The drink would help keep morale high. He stated that he would consider the request favorably. Alan expressed his gratitude. Before concluding, the Baron remarked that they had been fortunate and advised them not to let it go to their heads. The scene shifts to everyone gathered before the man. He praises the group's hunting skills and states that great achievements deserve rewards. Otherwise, he would not be a good Baron. Then he announces that he will grant them the social position of commoner. In Alan's mind, excitement rises immediately. Now he will be able to hunt beyond the boundaries of the estate. He had dreamed of that moment countless times over the past years. His first destination would be the White Dragon Mountains, where he intended to hunt dragons. The Baron adds that all participants in the hunts over more than 10 years will also receive the same status. He asks them to identify those who have already worked for a decade. Afterward, he decides to return to the residence so that he may head back to the city and rest. He further explains that His Majesty wishes to promote the village of Krina as an example to the rest of the kingdom. For that reason, he asked how the boar hunts had begun. The Baron observes that it is a delicate matter and asks whether Rodden can recount what happened. It all began in the spring, 13 years earlier. Around 100 serfs from neighboring villages moved to the region to assist in developing the lands under the reclamation decree. After 6 months of hard labor, they had cleared a large portion of the forest. Autumn was approaching when disaster struck. A massive boar suddenly appeared and attacked, devouring most of the wheat and potatoes reserved for winter. Many of those serfs had gone to the frontier after suffering hunger in their former villages. Returning was not an option. It was then that Rodden took the initiative. He proposed that they hunt the boars to obtain meat. At that time, they did not possess the weapons, armor, or knowledge they have now. Even so, all the men united, using pickaxes and hoes as improvised weapons, and managed to bring down a single boar. The Baron is impressed by the account and states that they should be proud, for they united to accomplish an extremely difficult task. However, he reminds them that they lost a friend in the process. After defeating the boar, they overcame a trial of the gods and their wounds were healed. Yet their companion was not as fortunate. He has told Rodden many times that he should not blame himself, but he does not listen. At that moment, Alan finally understands why his father protected those commoners. He had already lost friends in that way. The Baron does not wish for such a painful memory to be revived. But he wants Rodden to understand something. Despite the losses, the village would never have prospered without his prudent decisions. He wishes to honor everyone's bravery with new rewards. Rodden then asks whether his son could work in the Baron's household. The man consults the butler about the existence of a vacancy. He replies that there is one. The request is then accepted. Alan, however, does not wish to work there, because he needs to take care of his summons and feels that he must find a way out of that situation. Even so, seeing his father so happy, he keeps his thoughts to himself. Upon arriving home, he bids farewell to everyone. He decides to have one last sparring match with his friend, and this time, he wins. He tells her that they will continue seeing each other often. His father asks him to work with dedication, for that is the first great opportunity of his life, and says that he places many expectations upon him. After the farewell, the story brings another episode to a close. After moving to the state of Grainel, Alan gradually begins to adapt to his new routine, especially to Cecil's constant requests. One day, she asks for help picking fruit from a very tall tree. The two of them make a great effort to reach the fruit, but when they finally succeed, Alan takes a bite and immediately spits it out, because the taste is extremely unpleasant. He comments that fruits that grow on very tall trees are usually quite sour, and asks if she already knew that before making him taste something that did not even seem edible. Cecil assures him that she had no idea. Without prolonging the discussion, she says that now she wants something sweet to remove the bad taste from her mouth and decides that she needs to go to the market to make up for the situation. Before Alan can respond, the sky suddenly darkens. When he looks up, he sees a huge aircraft crossing the skies. Cecil does not understand his astonishment and explains that it is just a magical ship, something relatively common there. Even so, for Alan, it is the first time he has seen something so impressive. He had already seen tools powered by magic stones, such as clocks and lamps, mentioned by Paloma, but nothing compared to that flying vessel. The following morning, Alan wakes up excited, commenting to himself that that place seems like a completely different world from the uncomfortable internet cafes where he used to sleep. The first thing he does is breathe in the aroma of a po, which helps him recover his magic points more quickly, reducing the recovery time from 6 to 5 hours. After that, he goes to breakfast and meets the head butler, Rickwell. Rickwell asks if he is getting along well with Cecil. Alan responds without much enthusiasm, remembering the difficulties she usually imposes. A certain compassion can be heard in Rickwell's voice when he comments that she would not demand so much if Alan were only a simple errand boy. Curious, Alan asks what exactly the difference is between an errand runner and an official servant, since no one had explained that clearly. Rickwell clarifies that among the servants of higher position are the butler, the keeper of the keys, the valet, the lady's companion, and the head chef. In lower positions are the coachman, the assistant cook, the gardener, the household employees, and the maids. All of these are considered part of the family. Errand boys, on the other hand, are merely temporary helpers who are not officially part of the household. Alan is surprised to learn that the servants are treated as members of the family. He finally understands why his father became so emotional when he was accepted there. Rickwell reminds him that the master of the house was very generous in integrating him, so he should value that opportunity. After breakfast, Alan helps serve the meal to the Grainel family. He notices that, despite the social differences, the nobility's food is not much more sophisticated than that of the employees. In silence, he observes while everyone eats. Grainel's wife comments that he learned the duties of a servant quickly. Alan politely thanks her, saying that he owes it to the patient teachings of his superiors. Verosa praises his posture and tells her husband that she likes the boy's manners. Grainel agrees, stating that even without talent, his manners are impressive. Alan is surprised to realize that Grainel already knew about his lack of talent, understanding that the man investigated his past. When Cecil discovers that he does not possess any special talent, she takes the opportunity to proudly say that she is a 2-star sorceress. Alan is genuinely impressed, since that is a high classification. She continues bragging, mentioning that her brother Mihai is a skilled swordsman. The grandmother soon scolds her, saying that it is not proper to boast about one's own gifts. Meanwhile, Thomas, the other brother, begins to cry, asking why he is the only one who does not possess any talent at all. The father tries to encourage him, explaining that he will be able to study at the nobles' school in the capital. Thomas replies that he would like to attend the city academy, as Mihai did. But the father explains that that institution is reserved only for those who have special talent. Grainel adds that he himself studied at the nobles' school, and that it was there that he met his wife and formed his family. Thomas accepts the situation with sadness, and Cecil notices that he is still downcast. Later, with the afternoon free, Alan decides to leave the mansion to visit the market. For him, it is an environment completely different from the village where he grew up. Excited, he decides to enter the Adventurers Guild. Without hesitation, he asks the receptionist if he can become an adventurer, informing her that he is 8 years old. She apologizes and explains that the minimum age for registration is 12 years old. Visibly disappointed, Alan does not give up on his dream of facing monsters, even while performing the role of servant out of respect for his father. He then decides to observe the reward posters fixed to the wall. He sees Level E missions for horned rabbits, Level B for goblins and giant frogs, Level C for orcs, and even special ants that reward 3 silver coins. At that moment, an adventurer named Raven approaches and says that that is no place for a child. Alan replies that he is already leaving, but takes the opportunity to ask why the posters do not indicate the exact locations where the monsters appear. Raven explains that these monsters can be found in several regions. He begins to grow impatient, asking since when he became Alan's teacher. Alan clarifies that he is only curious and wants to understand how the classifications work. Even reluctantly, Raven explains that the higher the monster's level, the farther from the city it usually appears. The most dangerous ones lie near the White Dragon Mountains. Alan stores that information in his memory. As he continues observing the board, he sees a Level B reward for a myrtle, worth 200 gold coins. It is a monster known as Mash, something that immediately catches his attention. After hearing the monster's name, Alan decides to ask one more question. He wants to know why no one accepts the mission, since the reward is so high and the poster even indicates the location. Raven explains that the target is extremely strong and incredibly fast, which makes it very dangerous. For that reason, the most appropriate course of action is to leave that kind of threat to the Order of Knights. Alan smiles faintly, realizing that Raven has already revealed a great deal of information. Even so, he takes the opportunity to ask about the white dragon mentioned on the board. Since the reward appears to have been there for a long time, Raven shows a certain weariness at so many questions, but Alan promises that he will leave as soon as he answers. He then explains that no one accepts that mission because the White Dragon is far too powerful. However, in the White Dragon Mountains there are enormous deposits of mithril, an extremely rare and highly valuable metal. Many people wish to extract it, but as long as the dragon remains there, that is impossible. For that reason, the reward continues to increase over the decades. Upon hearing this, Alan quickly concludes that mithril must be worth more than 1,000 gold coins. Before he can continue the conversation, Raven's group Rita and Milsey approaches. They also notice Alan's dark hair and eyes, something uncommon. He simply explains that he was learning about monsters and thanks Raven before leaving the guild. He has already obtained almost all the information he wanted and now feels that he is ready to take the next step. As he leaves the city, the cold air hits him. But he does not intend to waste the day off that he earned with so much effort. A guard tries to stop him and asks for his travel authorization. Alan then shows the crest of the Grand Bell family, which grants him free entry and exit from the city. The gates open, and he runs toward the forest, determined to face as many monsters as he can. He has waited 8 years for that moment, but he knows he should not stray too far from the city. Since stronger monsters inhabit distant regions, he decides to hunt about 10 kilometers from the wall. Upon finding a suitable location, he begins by testing his summoned creatures. He orders Higgins to walk 1 meter to the right, and he obeys without difficulty. Since he has 150 intelligence, enough to understand simple commands. As he has not yet encountered any monsters, Alan concludes that the encounter rate is low. For that reason, he summons several Hawkins, believing it would be more efficient to let them search for targets. He orders them to use their keen vision ability to locate nearby monsters. Meanwhile, he summons Tama. Unlike Hawkins, Tama has only 28 intelligence, which makes understanding more complex orders difficult. Even so, Alan decides to test the dagger he received from Dagora, taking it out of his grimoire. Soon, Hawkins reports that he has found a monster nearby. Alan runs in the indicated direction, but begins to realize that he should have given more specific instructions, such as limiting the search area. Shortly after, he spots a group of goblins. He hides behind a tree, but is quickly detected. Without wasting time, he summons Tama 5 times and then 5 more times, completely surrounding the goblins. Since he can summon creatures at any point within a 50-meter radius that is within his field of vision, the strategy works well. He orders Tama to attack with his claws, and this time the tiger understands immediately. Despite the strong start, the goblins react. So Alan decides to change tactics and summons Papillon, who possesses the ability to induce sleep. The technique works, leaving several goblins asleep. He tries to attack them with stones, but realizes that the damage is not sufficient. So he lets Tama finish off the enemies. After defeating 5 goblins, Alan receives 1,000 experience points, which he considers excellent. He understands that efficiency is essential. Even if a goblin offers less experience than a giant boar, it can be defeated much more quickly, making the overall gain superior. After collecting the magic stones left behind by the monsters, he asks Hawkins to search for more groups of goblins within a 3-kilometer radius. Upon finding others, Alan repeats the strategy several times, accumulating experience until nightfall. By the end of the day, he has defeated 5 horned rabbits and 80 goblins, totaling 16,050 experience points and gaining 2 levels. During the battles, he also realizes that Papillon has about an 80% chance of inducing sleep in goblins, which demonstrates that even a single summoned creature can be extremely useful against large groups, depending on the right ability. He also learns more about magic stones. Rank D stones cannot be used to create rank E creatures, and the reverse does not work either. This means that there may be situations in which lower level creatures are necessary. Determined to continue hunting, his routine begins to attract attention. The Baron summons him, praises his performance, and questions what he does on his days off, since he leaves at dawn and returns late. Pressured, Alan admits that he hunts magical creatures outside the city, justifying himself by saying he is Rodden's son and has it in his blood. The argument convinces the Baron. The tension rises when the Baron mentions the horned rabbit Alan has supposedly been raising, revealing that he has been under observation. The Master believes the boy is trying to domesticate beasts to sell meat illegally and advises him to stop. Alan clarifies that he only discards the carcasses. A profitable agreement then emerges. The Granbert family will buy each carcass for 1 silver coin. With official permission to hunt, Alan begins to profit in addition to gaining experience. He sets aggressive goals to slaughter at least 100 goblins and hunt horned hares to accumulate XP, magic stones, and money. During the hunt, his radar detects something moving far beyond the normal range. Upon investigating, he finds a trio from the guild cornered and gravely injured. Ilithy refuses to abandon her companions. Unable to reveal his summons, Alan decides to fight using only his own attribute. At level 12, with attack and speed above 300 points, he surpasses rank D monsters without magical assistance and neutralizes the main threats, leaving only a weakened goblin for the adventurers to finish off. Rave is on the verge of death, and the group has no magical power left to heal him. Rita falls into despair, but Alan uses the Herb of Life, a rare item generated by Memetero. The effect is immediate. The bleeding stops and Rave stabilizes. Relief spreads through the group. Noticing that Rita is also injured, Alan hands her another herb. The adventurers are shocked to see something so valuable being used so casually. To them, it is a rare treasure. To Alan, it is merely a resource from his system, which he downplays as something common. Rave, now recovered, tries to formally thank Alan for saving the group, but the boy cuts off any attempt at ceremony. He says he is late to meet his daily hunting quota and does not want fame. As a condition for the rescue, he demands absolute silence about his identity and ability. In exchange, he accepts 100 level E magic stones. For the adventurers, it is an absurdly low price for their lives. For Alan, it is the ideal resource to sustain his summon. Raven promises to deliver the batch within a week. Alan turns the incident into a strategic analysis. He compares the Myra's flower, which was used to slowly heal his father Rodden, with the Herb of Life generated by Mamatero, which healed Rave instantly. He concludes that the herb works with fixed and immediate restoration, making it far more efficient in emergencies. He also notes that he received 160 experience points for the goblin defeated jointly, about 80% of the total value. Realizing that shared combat does not drastically reduce the gain, by the end of the day, he accumulates valuable information about healing and experience. The scene cuts to the dining hall, where everyone is gathered around the table. The noble guest shows great fascination as he tastes the meat being served. With each bite, His expression reveals surprise and satisfaction. He comments, impressed, that this was the meat Alan and his family used to hunt. He states that he expected nothing less from Rodden's son and mentions having heard that they had reached the goal of eliminating 20 boars. Upon hearing this, Alan feels extremely happy and proud. The boy, curious, asks why they were not eating boar that year, since it was traditionally one of the main highlights of the meals. Alan then recalls that the decision was the result of an order from the king, who had requested that all slaughtered boars be sent to the royal capital. Upon hearing the explanation, the boy shows irritation, questioning the fact that the servants in the capital were consuming more meat than the nobles themselves. However, his father quickly corrects him, asking him to show respect and reminding him that social position does not determine anyone's worth, trying to shift the focus of the conversation. The boy asks Alan to hunt a white rabbit for him. Before any answer is given, the girl intervenes and tells him to speak with her before going around ordering Alan to do something. She makes it clear that he should not treat him as a subordinate. The atmosphere at the table becomes slightly tense, as everyone realizes that behind a simple dinner, issues of respect, authority, and coexistence are beginning to emerge. They discover that Alan may end up getting into trouble if the manager of Rinnan finds out about certain movements that have been happening behind the scenes. There are discreet comments, worried glances, and advice given in low tones. He listens to all the warnings with apparent attention, but in the end, he simply decides to ignore them. Instead of stepping back or acting cautiously, he casually announces that he is going to hunt a white deer, a rank C monster, at the same level as the python they had faced previously. For him, it is not recklessness, but a test of skill, a way to measure his own growth. The scene cuts to the forest. Alan advances calmly, with firm steps and controlled breathing. He observes the movement of the leaves, listens to the distant sound of branches breaking, and feels the change in the density of the air. When he finally finds the target, he does not attack immediately. He analyzes the terrain, measures the distance, and only then summons Pionto and the other spirits. The strategy is clear from the beginning: provoke, retreat, and strike at the right moment, wearing down the enemy before the final blow. He coordinates the summoned beasts with impressive precision. He advances, calls them back, repositions them within seconds. He can only do this because he completely masters the special abilities of each creature. Without that absolute control, any mistake would mean losing the encirclement. The white deer is gradually pressured. Surrounded on all sides, it tries to react but finds no real opening. Then it ends up falling into the pit that had been created, and thus the battle comes to an end. The capture is clean and efficient, with no waste of energy. The scene shifts to the castle. An uproar begins when a massive demonic beast appears carrying the slain deer. Guards panic. Some even shout that a demon is invading the gates. Weapons are raised. Orders are shouted. The tension only decreases when they explain that everything happened under the orders of young Master Thomas. The white deer had been captured specifically for the New Year's banquet. The family is impressed by the feat. Comments of surprise and approval spread throughout the hall. Alan, on the other hand, keeps a neutral expression. He received 2,500 experience points for the hunt, but considers it little for the effort and preparation involved. Internally, he decides that he does not intend to repeat something like that frequently if the return continues at that level. Sebas then raises another important issue. How did someone so young manage to purchase and control a rank C magical beast? They say Alan has no special talent, but the facts begin to contradict that narrative with each new result. The answer comes in the form of official recognition. Alan receives a new position, Hunting Guard. The role is simple and direct: to hunt magical beasts to supply meat to the castle and protect residents attacked by monsters in the surrounding areas. In return, he will have a fixed salary of 100 silver coins per month. For him, it is perfect. Now he can hunt monsters as part of his official duties without needing to act in secret. There is, however, one condition. He will continue serving Lady Cecil as a priority and will only be allowed to act as a hunting guard once a week. Alan tries to hide his frustration. On the inside, he would like to go out hunting every day, accumulating experience without interruptions. On the outside, he accepts with a smile, like the exemplary servant everyone expects to see. Later, the scene shows Cecil returning to the castle. Now 14 years old, she appears more mature, with a more confident posture and a firmer gaze. She complains that he promised to return during the summer vacation and did not show up. He apologizes immediately and explains that he was clearing dungeons as a mandatory task from the academy. If he failed to meet the required quotas, he could be expelled. The scene cuts to everyone already at home. As the days pass, Alan keeps hunting various rank sea monsters and selling them to the family. Everyone is quite impressed by the achievement, and Mihai decides to challenge Alan to a duel. Alan calculates quickly. He rose from level 13 to level 20 thanks to the weekly hunts and constant training. He believes he can win, but he knows it will not be easy. The duel begins. Mihai is fast and technical. His strikes precise and well calculated. Alan blocks heavy attacks using only one hand. Testing his limits, he observes his opponent's speed, measures strength, adjusts his stance as needed. The audience watches in silence, surprised by the balance of the confrontation. Mihai has improved a great deal. Even so, Alan keeps up with the pace without showing fatigue. At the decisive moment, Mihai identifies a minimal opening in the defense and acts without hesitation. The final strike is clean. Alan accepts the defeat without excuses. He acknowledges the difference and says he wants a rematch next summer. Mihai agrees, but makes a simple request in return: that Alan take good care of Cecil while they are in the academic city. The agreement is sealed with mutual respect. Days later, Mihai returns to the academic city, the same destination Kirina, Dogora, and Cecil will follow one day. The scene shifts to a meeting between noble families. Lord Carnal visits the Granbell family in a formal gathering surrounded by etiquette and rigid protocols. At first glance, the conversation revolves around boar meat, recent harvests, and typical formalities between neighboring territories. Restrained smiles, measured compliments. But the real subject is another, mithril. There is a deposit in the White Dragon Mountains, located exactly on the border between the two territories. The ore is far too valuable to be ignored. The problem is that a white dragon has settled precisely on the side controlled by the Granbell family, preventing any attempt at safe mining. No worker dares approach while the creature remains there. 100 years ago, the situation was the opposite. At that time, the dragon occupied carnal territory, blocking their extraction. An old cycle that now repeats itself, as if the mountain itself were testing the patience of both houses. And this time, the decision they make may alter the balance between them for a long time. The visit also brings another delicate issue besides mithril: the talent ceremony. One of the sons did not awaken magical talent, and among nobles, that is far from a minor detail. Having talent can mean immediate prestige, political influence, and military power in the future. It can also generate internal disputes, silent comparisons, and dangerous expectations within the family itself. The tension lingers in the air during the formal conversation. Even though no one mentions the matter directly, smiles remain present, but they are restrained. Every word is carefully measured. The scene cuts to Alan on his day off. With no immediate obligations at the castle, he meets his adventurer friends to ask for help with armor and similar matters. He decides to hunt farther than usual. He has eliminated around 10,000 goblins over the past months. Rank D monsters have ceased to be efficient for his growth. The experience gained is far too small for the effort involved. Now he wants to face something greater: C-rank creatures. He knows that experienced adventurers can die facing a single enemy of that level. It is not a light step. Before leaving, he buys light armor designed not to restrict his movements. He adjusts each buckle carefully. In the forest, the air feels heavier as he advances. After some time, he finds the first target, a C-rank orc. The creature's presence is imposing. Alan summons his creatures without hesitation. Unlike ordinary beasts, summons do not tire or hesitate. The battle is direct, intense, without unnecessary flourishes. He maintains control of the field, adjusts positions, creates openings. The confrontation is harsh, but it ends in victory. He obtains the magical stone without needing to resort to tricks or complex traps. The conclusion is clear. He can now defeat enemies of that level alone. But the sense of accomplishment does not last long. an even more threatening adversary emerges from the shadows of the forest. Heavy armor covers almost his entire body. Absurd strength can be felt with every step he takes. Alan remembers what Raven once said. He had nearly died facing a similar group. The memory serves as a warning. He attempts a direct attack. It does not work. The enemy's defense is far too solid. The impact echoes through Alan's arm, but it does not pierce the protection. He changes his strategy in the middle of the fight. He stops focusing only on the physical body and begins aiming at the magical stone as the decisive point. If he cannot overcome the armor externally, he must strike the core. The battle becomes risky. Every approach is a real danger. By a narrow margin, a very narrow margin, he finds the necessary opening and wins. As he catches his breath, he realizes something important. Physical attacks are not enough against certain opponents. Strength and technique have limits. Perhaps he needs magic. His intelligence is high. In theory, he could learn. The scene shifts again. Alan seeks out Professor Arlen and asks directly whether he can use magic even without apparent talent. The answer is cold, almost automatic. Without talent, there is no magic. They ask him to place his hand on the official test once more as confirmation. Nothing shines. No sign, no reaction. The result is confirmed without room for doubt. Alan understands the reality. As a summoner without magical talent, traditional magic is not an option for him, and that realization weighs more heavily than any battle wound. It is not physical pain, it is limitation. In an almost trivial moment, someone tells him to eat a cookie, as if that could ease the atmosphere or resolve the frustration. The city plunges into panic when news spreads that a monster known as the Killer Boy is rapidly approaching. The warning first reaches the watch posts and, within a few minutes, begins to spread through the streets like wildfire. One of the guards confirms the information with urgency. The creature was seen advancing at high speed, and if it continues at that pace, it should reach the southern port in less than 2 hours. The situation becomes even more troubling for another reason. Zeroth, the most powerful commander of the city guard, is away on a mission and will only return in 2 days. Without him, the military strength of the city is clearly weakened. With no other alternative, an immediate order is given by the remaining officers. The Adventurers Guild must be summoned to help with the defense while the residents are evacuated as quickly as possible. Messengers run through the streets, warning bells begin to ring, and merchants hurriedly close their stalls. Every minute becomes precious. Alan listens to the entire conversation attentively while observing the movement around him. After a few moments of silence, he makes his decision. He will also participate in the battle. Cecil immediately tries to stop him. She reminds him that he is her personal guard and that his priority should be protecting her, not running toward danger. To her, losing Alan in a reckless battle would be unacceptable. Even so, he keeps a firm posture. He explains that he also has responsibilities to the Granverge family and cannot simply ignore a threat that puts the entire city at risk. The monster has been classified as rank B, something far above the average of the adventurers who live in that city. Many of those present understand what that means. Facing a creature of that level can easily result in deaths. Even so, Alan advances determined to confront it. The battle begins in a chaotic manner. The creature invades the area near the port with violence, destroying structures and attacking everything it finds in its path. Its movements are far too fast for ordinary guards to react properly. Desperation grows when they realize that there are still civilians trapped in the monster's path. Some people did not manage to evacuate in time and are now running through the streets trying to escape. While the adventurers try to divert it away from the city and protect the survivors, Alan takes the front line. He provokes the creature, draws its attention, and forces the monster to focus its attacks on him. The fight drags on for a long time. The enemy is fast and possesses impressive endurance. Every strike Alan lands seems to slow the creature for only a few seconds. Even using several abilities and summons to weaken it, he quickly realizes that defeating it will not be simple. Even so, he keeps fighting. Step by step, blow after blow, Alan leads the monster farther and farther away from the city. His strategy is not only to win, but to buy time. The farther away the battle takes place, the greater the chances that everyone will escape. After an extremely exhausting confrontation, which seems to stretch far beyond the normal physical limit, he finally manages to shake off the creature. However, shortly after the victory, completely exhausted, Alan loses consciousness and collapses at the scene. When he wakes up again, he finds Eiji by his side. She is clearly irritated that he put himself in so much danger. Her eyes show frustration, but also evident relief when she realizes that he survived. Alan then explains what really happened. The monster was not defeated immediately. After leaving the city, the creature continued chasing Alan for 3 entire days. During all that time, he fought, retreated, and provoked the enemy repeatedly, always maintaining enough distance to prevent the monster from returning to the urban area. Only after that long confrontation did he finally manage to defeat it once and for all. Later, once he has recovered enough to present himself before the authorities, Alan delivers a complete report to those responsible for the city's defense. He describes the course of the battle, the decisions he made, and the risks involved. Even though he did not eliminate the creature immediately, his effort was essential to saving many lives, since he prevented the monster from returning to the city and continuing the massacre. As recognition for his feat, Alan receives a generous reward, several payment letters, and official recognition from the city. With the money in hand, he already begins to consider the possibility of buying a sword made of mithril. The scene then cuts to focus on the training of summoners and the functioning of summons. They explain that the information of the creatures can be updated as they evolve, and that the greater the number of summons a summoner possesses, the greater his potential strength can become. Alan draws a great deal of attention because of his accelerated growth. In just 6 months, he defeated around 2,000 enemies and reached level 28, something considered impressive in such a short time. The scene cuts to Alan training with a sword alongside the boy. After spending quite a long time practicing, he ends up losing once again. The scene then shifts back to all of them having dinner together. While they are discussing the subject, new urgent information arrives. A powerful trap apparently moved from its previous location. An adventurer claims to have seen this creature near Lake Carnal. If that information is true, capturing that trap could offer an enormous strategic advantage. In addition, it might be the ideal opportunity to create a new rank B trap and strengthen the forces of the region even further. Zirafu then receives a new mission: investigate the supposed trap that appeared near Lake Carnal. Before anything else, he must confirm the exact location of the creature. After that, he will have to search through 4 different regions to discover what is truly happening in that area. The situation is far too dangerous. Besides the possible trap in Lake Carnal, there is also an orc village in the region and another rank B monster nearby. The investigation alone could take more than a month. Unable to participate, Alan accepts the decision. But deep down, he is not satisfied at all. If that trap begins defeating other monsters in the region, he could lose a great opportunity to gain experience. Because of that, he decides to train on his own. Already far from the city, he realizes that he still has plenty of magical energy available and decides to take advantage of it to test his abilities more thoroughly. His attributes have improved significantly. His summoning level has reached level 5. His endurance has also increased, and his expansion ability is already at level 4. In addition, he recently acquired an ability related to dinosaurs. Raising the level of that ability took more than 2 years, so now he wants to fully understand what it is capable of doing. First, he tests the expansion ability again and confirms that he can control several units at the same time. After that, he decides to try something different, sharing abilities with his summons. For the test, he chooses Hulk. Suddenly, something unexpected happens. Mihai's vision changes completely. Now he can also see through the creature's eyes. It is as if he were controlling 2 bodies at the same time. Excited by the result, he decides to expand the experiment and summons more Hulks. When he shares the ability with all of them, he begins to see from 5 different points simultaneously. His mind starts functioning differently, almost as if he were dividing his own thoughts to control several perspectives at once. But there is a limit. When Mihai tries to share the ability with a 6th creature, an intense pain appears in his head, as if his own body were being pushed beyond what it can endure. He immediately stops the test. realizing that something is wrong. Thinking calmly, he begins to analyze the reason for that limitation. After reflecting for a while, he reaches a possible conclusion. The limit is probably linked to the intelligence attribute. With the current level of that attribute, he can control only 5 units at the same time. To confirm his theory, he decides to conduct another experiment. Mihai then increases his intelligence attribute and, shortly afterward, tries once again to share the ability with another summon. This time, the result is different. He manages to connect the ability with a 6th creature without feeling the same intense pain as before. Now the situation begins to get interesting. With this new capacity, he starts experimenting with several strategies. Mihai summons multiple rank D creatures to test different formations and combat tactics. Among them, a rank D spider catches his attention. In addition to its own abilities, it possesses a strengthening effect that can improve the performance of the other summons. While continuing his tests, he discovers something even more important, a magic recovery ability. This discovery completely changes his way of fighting. With mana regeneration, Mihai now has far more freedom during battles. Now he can keep his summons active for much longer and use abilities far more frequently without worrying so much about exhausting his magical energy. Hawk and the other summons take on specific roles, acting mainly as support and also as means of transportation when necessary. Observing the rapid growth of his abilities, Mihai realizes that his possibilities are increasing at an impressive speed. This excites him greatly, but at the same time it awakens a certain fear about how far this power might take him. He decides to visit his family with his bird, and there he sees Kiku Kirina from the moment she appeared calling out to him. His bird allows him to see his mother. The emotion of that moment still remains alive in his heart. The scene shifts to 2 men having a conversation. One of them begins by congratulating everyone for the work accomplished over the last 6 months. However, not everything is good news. During the long period in which the mines remained inactive, they ended up turning into true nests of monsters. And the problem does not end there. The nearby villages, which once operated as mithril refineries, were also invaded and are now occupied by orcs and goblins. One of the men comments that he would like to put the closest mine back into operation, but asks how long it would take for that to happen. The other replies that the process would take around 3 years. Upon hearing that, the first man shows his dissatisfaction, saying that this deadline is far too long and that it would be better to speed up the work as much as possible. Soon after, they change the subject and begin talking about what Viscount Carnal has been doing lately. According to the information they received, he tried to force the advancement of the mining operations. However, that decision ended up attracting the fury of a white dragon. They say that in a single instant, all the miners who were working there were reduced to ashes. Now no one knows for sure what the Viscount's next step will be, since his mines will need to remain closed for quite some time. Because of this, everyone agrees that it is better to act with great caution. Faced with this situation, they make a decision to summon the knights to eliminate all the monsters occupying the mines and the nearby regions. Meanwhile, Alan observes everything and begins to reflect in silence. For him, the time to act has finally arrived. Shortly afterward, a message appears in front of him informing him that he defeated an orc and received 15,000 experience points. Alan realizes that during the last 6 months he managed to take great advantage of the opportunities to grow stronger. He remembers that when he turns 12 years old, he will leave Gravellies to follow the path of an adventurer. There are still 2 years left until that moment arrives, and he intends to use that time to become stronger and repay everything he has received. If the monsters in that settlement were not eliminated soon, they would begin to multiply again. To Alan, the situation resembled a game. In the past, when he spent hours playing video games, it was enough to repeat the same hunting area to accumulate experience, but that was not a game. Those monsters devoured real people. Realizing the danger, he decided that he would not allow that to continue. As long as those creatures existed, more victims would appear, so he made a simple decision: exterminate all of them. The battle started quickly. The enemies tried to escape, but it was already too late. The escape route was blocked. For Alan, it was like facing a stage that he knew he could clear. Before long, he found the leader of the horde, the Goblin King. Even though he was the chief of the group, he did not represent a major threat. Alan and his allies had already defeated thousands of monsters of the same level. When the fight ended, the result appeared clearly. In that entire village, he had eliminated 223 goblins and received 48,800 experience points. The amount seemed low for so much effort. Even so, it was part of the plan. For a while, he would continue destroying goblin villages that attacked humans. At some point, he would eventually reach an orc village ruled by an orc king. Meanwhile, the story shifts to the Granbell family. Cecil had already turned 10 years old. Alan was also there, and something about him seemed different. With the end of the so-called age correction, his attributes could now be read easily, and the numbers showed how much he had evolved. During training, Cecil decided to fight seriously against Alan. The two immediately began the duel. Cecil was much faster than he had been the previous year and believed that he would win this time. At first it seemed possible, since his speed had increased significantly. However, Alan continued predicting every movement. No matter what attack came, he already seemed to know what would happen next. Even while trying his absolute best, Alan could not surpass the boy. At the end of the fight, he realized the truth. He had not lost only because of speed. The boy's strength was also superior. Despite all his effort, he was defeated once again. Alan watched the scene with satisfaction. Those 3 years of school training had greatly improved Mihai's abilities. The father also recognized that, even so, everyone knew that Mihai was still on another level. The conversation continued, and Cecil commented that he wanted to learn swordsmanship directly from his older brother. Mihai did not object. On the contrary, he said that he would be happy to help. Even Alan considered learning as well. That was when Mihai brought unexpected news. He announced that he had received a noble mission. Because of that, he would be away from home for quite a long time. The revelation caught everyone by surprise. When they asked about the details of the mission, he explained that he could not reveal anything. The only thing he said was even more shocking. He would depart the very next day. Cecil was devastated. She had hoped to live beside her brother again. Mihai tried to calm her, promising that he would return after 3 years. Even so, for Cecil that time felt far too long. Despite the sadness, the family knew that noble duties could not be refused. The name Granbell carried responsibilities. In the end, Cecil accepted the situation and promised that she would wait for her brother's return. Before leaving, Mihai received one last instruction from his father. He asked Mihai to take care of Cecil and Alan and to protect them. Mihai replied that he would do whatever was necessary. Now he would depart to fulfill his obligations as a member of the Granbell family. Months later, Alan continued his hunt against monsters. In 6 months, he had destroyed all the goblin villages in the region and reached level 35. Now the next stage of the plan arrived, attacking an orc village. The operation began with caution. The improvements in Harami's evasion abilities were working well, allowing them to face enemies directly. Braun also proved to be extremely useful during the battle. Even without knowing how much damage his summoned creatures could still withstand, Alan trusted them. The problem was that these summons fought until their limit, and when they reached the maximum amount of damage, they simply disappeared suddenly. To deal with the enemy archers, Alan summoned 2 fighter creatures and ordered them to eliminate the threats from a distance. With that, the group advanced. The resistance was greater than he expected. There were around 200 enemies in the village. Even so, the experience points began to rise quickly as the monsters fell. The plan seemed to work. Although the battle lasted longer than those against goblins, suddenly something unexpected happened. A magical explosion appeared on the battlefield. Alan realized immediately. Magic was involved. Soon the true leader of the place appeared. It was not just an ordinary boss. It was an orc king, and together with him there were magic users. That was the first time Alan witnessed real magic in that world, something that he himself could not even use. Instead of frightening him, it awakened his excitement. The gamer spirit inside him began to boil. Even so, the situation worsened quickly. There were enemies attacking points where his summons were not present. The orcs showed tactical intelligence. Some attacks came from positions where his iron balls could not reach. The battle turned into a war of attrition. there were still about 100 enemies remaining. To continue fighting, Alan decided to abandon part of his defense and use all available resources. He had many level D magic stones and could summon thousands of bears if necessary. Alan used his summons and magical fruits to keep the magic active, while facing a large group of orcs. However, the situation changed when the Orc King appeared. Much stronger, he destroyed several summons with ease, proving himself to be a rank B enemy. Alan tried to respond by creating and strengthening new creatures, but the summoning speed was not enough and the range of the attacks made it difficult to hit the boss. During the fight, Braun was injured, and Alan realized that he would not have enough power to maintain the spells and defeat the enemy at the same time. When the situation seemed lost, the commander of the Knights Xenof, known as the Demon of Battle, arrived on the battlefield and entered the confrontation against the Orc King. His strength was impressive, defeating powerful enemies with extreme ease. During the battle, Alan noticed that the knights were focusing on the magical orcs, the ones responsible for magic and for the long-distance attacks. After the fight, Xenof spoke with Alan and revealed that he suspected his secret hunts, since several magical beasts had been found without their magic stones. Even so, he did not accuse him and showed respect for his talent, asking only that Alan share information about the progress in the elimination of monsters. Later, Alan reviewed his combat strategy. His plan was to use 40 summon bears to pressure the orcs from all sides, eliminate the magical orcs first, and win through numerical advantage, as long as he himself was not struck directly. Alan realized that attacking orc villages was worth far more experience than fighting goblins around 335,000 points, more than 7 times the value. Even if he failed, he saw the situation like a player, learn from each attempt to improve the next one. Meanwhile, at the Granbell family mansion, a messenger from the royal family arrives bringing Mihai's diary and devastating news. Mihai fulfilled his duty as a noble, but died during the mission. The news shocks the family. The father suspects that, because they are low-ranking nobles, Mihai may have been sent on an extremely dangerous mission. But the messenger reacts coldly and leaves. Cecil remembers her brother's last words. When he asked them to take care of Alan, she begins to believe that Mihai already knew he might die. Furious, she confronts her father, but receives a harsh response. Nobles exist to fulfill duties, even if that means dying. Unable to accept that reality, Cecil isolates herself and eventually disappears from the mansion. While the servants begin desperate searches, she reflects alone about her brother's death and about the cruel fate of nobles. Despite the pain, she reaches a conclusion. She wants to protect the people she loves, even if that means facing suffering or risking her own life to change that fate. After running away from home, the exhaustion begins to weigh on her body much faster than she had imagined. Each step becomes more difficult, and the feeling of fatigue grows with every passing moment. It is at that moment that a voice appears, echoing in a strange way, telling her to return home. The sound feels close and distant at the same time, as if it were coming from inside her own mind. She becomes desperate, not knowing how to react, and everything around her begins to look distorted, as if reality were falling apart before her eyes, as if none of it were truly real. During the conversation, Alan mentions Mihai's strength, bringing back memories that still weigh heavily on him. He admits, without hesitation, that he was never able to defeat him, no matter how much he tried. But this time, there is something different in his words. For the first time, he is completely honest with himself, recognizing his own limits without trying to hide or justify them. With no other option, the two decide to return to the mansion. The journey back is silent, filled with thoughts that neither of them can fully express. Along the way, already visibly exhausted, Cecil asks to be carried, saying that she can no longer continue walking. Without complaining or hesitating, Alan agrees and carries her, moving forward with steady steps. When they arrive at the mansion, her father appears to receive them. He tries to reassure her, explaining that soon, the mining of Mithril will finally begin. As soon as the rights are officially handed over to the royal family, a large part of the responsibilities placed on her will be reduced. Upon hearing that, Cecil begins to understand the reason for all that recent urgency and pressure. Everything was part of something bigger. Even so, she makes her decision. She will fulfill her duty as a noble, and she will not run away. Just as Mihai did. Time then advances. 6 months pass since Mihai's death, and little by little the Granbell family begins to return to its routine. The orc villages, which once represented a constant threat, were eliminated by the knights, bringing a sense of safety that did not exist before. Meanwhile, the settlement focused on mithril extraction finally begins to take shape, growing day after day. The mining is expected to begin after the summer, and everything seems to be moving toward a period of stability and prosperity. However, not everything is completely resolved. There is still a problem that cannot be ignored: Carmel. Without access to mithril, the situation on that side remains unstable, and tensions continue to linger. During the preparations, doubts arise. They say that Cecil might not be able to handle a mission of that level. Alan would like to participate, but he is warned that it will not be allowed. Even so, they recognize that long-range magical attacks could be useful. Despite that, Alan decides to go alone. When they arrive at the location, the truth is revealed. The target is a gigantic nest. More than 1,000 Lancer monsters live there, multiplying without stopping. At the center, there is a level B creature, the Armored Spear Queen. The problem is the structure. The entrance to the nest is narrow. Invading directly is impossible. If the fight happens inside, it will never end. Then, a strategy emerges: reduce the number of enemies first. The battle begins, but quickly they are surrounded. Even so, they keep advancing. Days pass, and then weeks. Even after an entire month of battle, the nest remains intact. Twice a week, he faces more than 200 enemies per day. In total, thousands have already been defeated, but it does not matter. The bodies disappear. The queen consumes them and generates new enemies. It is an endless cycle. Realizing that, he decides to change strategy. This time, he will not retreat. He remains on site every day. And then, finally, something changes. The number of enemies begins to decrease. Now, only one thing remains: the queen, advancing through the interior of the nest, which looks like a true labyrinth. He uses summons to map the path. It is like controlling multiple fronts at the same time, in a constant strategic battle, until he finds it: the egg chamber. After 2 months, he finally reaches the objective. The Armored Spear Queen is gigantic, much larger than any other monster. Her presence is overwhelming, but he already has a plan. First, he eliminates the smaller enemies. Then, he focuses on her. The battle is intense. The confrontation seems endless, but at the right moment, he finds an opening and orders the final attack. After a difficult fight, the queen is defeated. Exhausted, he realizes that he will not be able to return to the city that same day. Even so, he needs proof. He takes part of the queen's body, and also mithril ore found at the location. When he presents everything, no one believes it. They say it is impossible, that it cannot be true, but then they take a closer look. The ore could not have been obtained by chance, and little by little, the truth is confirmed. The nest exists, and everything happened exactly as it was described. With no more doubts, a decision is made. A 5th vein of ore has been discovered. The knights will be sent immediately. And then comes the recognition. Alan, his performance was impressive. His unauthorized entry will be ignored. And more than that, for discovering a new mithril deposit, he now receives a huge reward: 30% of the mining rights. Alan becomes confused upon hearing about the mining rights. At first, he does not understand exactly what that means, but soon they explain. With time, he will realize how much profit it can generate. Even without fully understanding, one thing becomes clear: he has achieved something enormous. Time moves forward. With the arrival of October, Alan finally turns 12 years old. Unexpected visitors arrive at the location, breaking the tranquility that had been established. The royal messenger appears once again, but this time his presence carries a different weight. He is not alone. At his side, there is a representative of the influential Carnal family. The mere presence of that name is enough to make the atmosphere tense. The mood changes immediately, becoming heavy and uncomfortable. After being formally received, the visitors begin by praising the recent success of the mining operations, acknowledging the progress that has been achieved. However, shortly afterward, they reveal the true reason for their visit. by presenting an unexpected proposal. The proposal involves the joint management of the so-called 3 white dragon veins. The idea, at first glance, seems simple and even advantageous. Granbell and Carnal would begin to share both administration and profits, putting a definitive end to the conflicts that have dragged on for years between the two sides. The contract is already completely prepared, with no room for changes, and more than that, it has already been signed by the Carnal family, demonstrating urgency and implicit pressure. Now, the final decision rests in Denshaku's hands. However, he does not accept it so easily. The speed with which the proposal appeared immediately raises suspicions. Something does not seem right. Without giving in to the pressure, Denshaku decides that he needs to go to the capital before making any final decision. He wants to understand the full situation, assess the risks, and ensure that there are no hidden traps behind that seemingly advantageous offer. The royal emissary, however, insists. He argues that refusing the proposal could be interpreted as greed, something that might lead to negative political consequences. On the other hand, accepting it without thinking could be even more dangerous. Denshaku makes his position clear and firm. He does not trust anyone easily, especially in situations that involve such great interests. He states that he will not accept anything that could put his family at risk. In his mind, all the hardships faced over the last 100 years are still vivid, an entire century of suffering, losses, and constant struggle. Now that they have finally achieved something valuable, he has no intention of giving it up so easily. The tension in the environment increases with every moment, and it becomes evident to everyone present that any choice made at that moment could bring serious consequences. Even in the face of this impasse, a possible solution begins to emerge. The idea is to wait for the return of the Knight Commander and only then proceed together to the capital to make a safer decision. But before any plan can be put into action, everything changes suddenly. Cecil is attacked. An intruder invades the place without warning, and chaos instantly takes over. Without hesitation, Alan reacts immediately and rushes into combat, trying to contain the threat. In the middle of the confusion, everyone tries to protect Cecil, but the situation quickly spirals out of control. Despite their efforts, they fail. Cecil is captured and taken away right before their eyes. Suddenly, one of the mages throws a smoke bomb that causes Alan to lose consciousness. When he wakes up, he realizes that both of them are tied up. Even in that condition, he knows that a summoner can still fight, as long as he can see enough to act. Without wasting time, he summons Chappie and begins to move strategically. Observing the environment around him, he realizes that they are inside some kind of storage area. The place is large, but it is filled with enemies. While staying hidden, he overhears the kidnappers talking among themselves. They analyze Alan, evaluating his abilities. Some comment that he is skilled enough to be sold as a slave, which reveals the true nature of that group. Others show concern, mentioning dangerous names. Among them, Zinov, the Knight Commander, appears someone known for having faced entire armies alone. At that moment, Alan understands something crucial. He cannot rely on external help. If he wants to survive and save Cecil, he will have to act on his own. As he tries to move more freely, he realizes an even bigger problem. His mithril sword is no longer with him. He probably lost it during the attack. Now, he is even more vulnerable. Even so, he does not retreat. As he continues analyzing the environment, something begins to catch his attention. The place is strange, too enclosed, too dark. There is a slight, constant swaying in the air. Gradually, the truth reveals itself. They are not on solid ground. They are inside a ship, but not an ordinary ship. It is a magical airship, floating above the clouds. The altitude makes any attempt to escape practically impossible. Even so, Alan remains calm and begins to think clearly. The place is large, divided into several areas including even a restaurant, which indicates that the structure is well organized. Moving silently, he ends up overhearing a decisive conversation. And then, the truth comes to light. Everything was planned from the very beginning. Cecil was not captured by chance. She is just a piece in a much bigger game, a hostage used as a tool of pressure. The objective is to force her family to accept the proposed contract. The threat is clear and cruel. If there is any resistance, parts of her body will be sent as a warning. At that moment, something changes inside Alan. His anger explodes uncontrollably. He cannot allow that to happen. Not after everything. Not with someone he decided to protect. Without hesitation, he makes a definitive decision. He will end everything right there. Quickly adjusting his strategy, he summons Ajaha and begins his counterattack. Now, there are no more doubts or hesitation. There is only one objective: to rescue Sissel. The attack began in a sudden and completely unexpected way, without any prior warning that would allow preparation. In the middle of the chaos that was forming, someone took the initiative and moved forward, shouting for everyone to fall back while opening a path through the enemy. Taking advantage of that moment of disorder, the boy appeared directly in front of the girl who was trapped, showing up almost as if he had teleported, and without any hesitation cut the ropes that were keeping her immobilized. When he least expected it, he ended up receiving a blow and being thrown far away. Soon, he used the plant so that he could heal himself. Alan summoned the spider to trap the man and ran off, leaving shields so that he would not follow. Without wasting time on explanations, he grabbed the girl and pulled her with him, acting in a quick and decisive way. And realizing that they would not have an advantage in direct combat, the boy made an extreme decision. He chose to escape through the most unlikely path possible, an extremely high platform. Without thinking twice, he jumped from there carrying the girl, trusting only in his own endurance to survive the fall. The impact was violent, making it clear that he had been injured, but even so he managed to get up and continue moving forward. After they moved far enough away, he used some herbs to treat part of the injuries, both his and the girl's, recovering the minimum necessary to continue. With no other option, he placed her on his back and started running again, knowing that the danger was still chasing them closely. The girl, still trying to understand what was happening, could not help but question who he really was, how he could become so strong from one moment to another, and where those unusual abilities came from. However, he simply ignored the questions and kept his focus on escaping, making it clear that he did not intend to fight, since he recognized that those enemies were far beyond what he could face at that moment. The objective changed completely. Now, everything revolved around surviving. The plan was to head toward a distant point in the mountain, a territory considered safe, even if it took several days to get there. During the journey, he summoned another creature with the function of erasing their tracks, trying to make the pursuit more difficult. Even so, he knew that it would not be so simple to shake them off, because his enemies were persistent and experienced. The girl realized that he was hiding much more than he showed, but also understood that he did not like to talk about himself. When night fell, they took a brief pause, without any real sense of safety, only what was necessary to recover strength and stay alive. It did not take long for it to become evident that the enemies were still nearby. After checking the surroundings, the boy returned with the confirmation of the worst. They had found the tracks. Faced with that, the idea of separating to increase their chances of survival came up, but he refused immediately. He had made a promise, and he did not intend to break it. Protecting that girl until the end and taking her back home was something that he would carry out to the very last consequences. The pursuit soon intensified again. Among the enemies, there was someone he had already faced years ago, making the situation even more tense. The fight began without any kind of hesitation or dialogue. The boy fought in an unusual way, focusing mainly on his physical strength and endurance. At a certain moment, one of them advanced and managed to grab him, believing he had gained the advantage. But that was part of the boy's plan. He had already prepared his body to deal with situations like that. The tension increased rapidly, and the atmosphere became heavier and heavier, as if he had already lived through something similar before. Luckily, he managed to send his dagger into the other eye of the monster and defeat it. In the middle of the confrontation, an old acquaintance appeared, someone who believed that he was already dead. With that, the battle stopped being just a pursuit and became something personal. With not many options, the boy ordered the girl to retreat and decided to face everyone alone, determined to hold them back for as long as possible. However, the situation got out of control when she tried to help him using magic and ended up putting herself in danger. It was then that one of the enemies revealed his true nature, showing himself to be much more dangerous than he appeared. He was someone with experience in war, someone who did not show any intention of sparing lives. The fight became even more brutal, with the boy being pushed almost to his limit. while the enemy continued provoking and pressing without giving any space for recovery. When everything seemed lost and the outcome was approaching, reinforcements arrived at the last second. A knight commander entered the battle and completely changed the course of the situation. His presence brought a new dynamic to the confrontation. The enemy showed a deep hatred for the knights, revealing a past marked by losses and resentment. Even so, the commander responded firmly, also sharing his own losses and the reasons that made him continue fighting. Without wasting time, he activated a powerful ability and ended the battle in a direct way, putting an end to the threat. With that, the pursuit finally came to an end after several days of constant tension. The scene cuts to the girl meeting with her family. To ensure that nothing reached the king, he had turned the entire situation into a dirty game, using the girl as the central piece. As soon as everything ended, an order was given without hesitation: prepare the carriage and head immediately to the castle. The objective was to take the case directly to the king and expose the whole truth. However, not everyone agreed with that decision, since there was a risk that only some involved would be punished, while the true responsible one would remain untouched. It was at that moment that an alternative appeared. Instead of relying only on direct justice, the boy offered something in exchange: the mining rights that he had received. The intention was to use that as a bargaining chip to investigate the truth more deeply and pressure the royal family to act more effectively. It was, in practice, a form of bribery, but with a clear purpose. He explained his reasoning in a simple and direct way. Powerful people rarely dirty their own hand. Those who carry out the actions are always others. And, in certain situations, protecting what truly matters requires acting in the same way. His words had an impact. The noble, who had always tried to act correctly, realized that reality demanded changes and ended up accepting the agreement. In this way, the problem was taken to the king. The ones involved were properly punished, and the main responsible ended up being removed. After that, a new moment began. They started to teach about the true role of the nobility, making it clear that it was not only about status, but also about responsibility. Using even a world map, they explained the broader scenario, showing the existence of several continents, kingdoms, and empires, all connected by an ancient threat that still influenced the present. The story of the Demon King then gained prominence. Decades ago, he had appeared and declared war on the world. At first, no one took it seriously, but soon the disaster came. The creatures under his command became stronger, his army grew rapidly, and several countries were destroyed in a short time. Not even other races were able to escape his influence. Faced with that, a great global alliance was formed in an attempt to contain that threat. Academies were created to train talented young people and send them directly to the battlefield. Even so, despite all the efforts, that was not enough. The war continued to be uneven, and the world remained on the brink of collapse. The situation only truly began to change when a hero finally appeared. He was a young man with an extraordinary talent, someone who entered the war at a very early age and, even so, managed to do what no one else had been able to do until then: turn the tide of the conflict. With his exceptional abilities and an unshakable determination, he recovered territories that had been lost and quickly became the greatest hope of humanity. Even so, despite his impressive achievements, the danger never completely disappeared, and the threat continued to loom over the world. All these events led to the creation of an extremely harsh rule. Talented young people, especially those of noble origin, began to be forced to serve directly in the war. It was not a choice, but an obligation imposed by necessity. And the cruelest part of all was the survival rate, extremely low. Many departed, but only half managed to return alive, while the others were lost on the battlefield. The scene shifts to Alan talking with the owner of the house. After the case was resolved, the rewards finally began to be distributed. The boy received recognition for everything he had done, having his efforts properly valued. However, there was something that would not change. The girl would still be sent to the war. Not even a direct request, made with insistence, was enough to free her from that fate. Her talent was considered too valuable to be ignored. It was then that a new proposal appeared. Instead of trying to avoid the inevitable, they offered him an alternative. A sum of money would be given so that he would assume the role of her bodyguard. The mission was simple, at least in theory, to accompany her during her time at the academy and, later, protect her on the battlefield. He accepted, but not without imposing his own conditions. Instead of accepting the entire financial reward, he preferred to exchange part of it for something that he considered much more important. His request was clear. He wanted to guarantee protection for his family and also for another close family, freeing both from the burden of taxes. After a brief consideration, the request was accepted, and the agreement was sealed. From that moment on, he left behind his old position and fully assumed his new role. In response, the noble family took an unexpected step. They began to officially recognize him as someone close, guaranteeing full support to him in the future, something that completely changed his position within that world. This sequence of events made him reflect deeply. Everything he had lived through until then began to make sense. The reason for having been brought to that world, the choices he made along the way, the difficulties he faced, none of that had been by chance. He understood that he needed all of that, the power he had acquired, the training he went through, and even the challenges he faced to become who he was at that moment. His objective was never just to survive. With the world still under constant threat and a war that was far from reaching its end, he made a definitive decision. Without any hesitation, he accepted the mission, and by her side, he would continue until the end, carrying with him a single clear objective: to defeat the Demon King. First of all, the family realizes that the letter Nini had sent never arrived that day. Not long afterward, Alan finally returns home after a long absence. 4 years have passed since then, and everyone is amazed by how much Alan has changed during that time. Mash and Myra have also grown considerably since they last met him. Since Myra was only a baby back then, she barely remembers him. Alan, on the other hand, clearly remembers the times they spent playing with Chappie's toys together. Soon after, the family thanks Alan for the letters and the money he had been sending every month, although they express concern about his financial situation. Alan then explains that he spent all that time living at the Granbell family's residence and reveals that he will begin studying at the academy in April. Because of that, he will no longer be able to send money every month. Even so, he hands over 100 silver coins to help cover the family's expenses. Everyone is completely stunned to see such a large amount of money. Alan explains that he earned it by selling his armor and also mentions that he still has another 600 silver coins saved. When he tells them that he defeated a powerful magical beast that had built its nest near the White Dragon Mountains, as well as goblins and orcs living in that area, his parents can only sigh and conclude that their son is still just as reckless as he has always been, since he has to return to fulfill his responsibilities. Alan says goodbye to his family. Before leaving, he promises to wait for his younger brother when he reaches the age to enroll in the academy. He then listens to his parents' advice as they ask him to take better care of his health, avoid pushing himself too hard, and be more cautious during his journey back. After returning to the Granbell family's residence, Alan spends several days helping take care of the garden while waiting for classes to begin. During a conversation, he is asked whether he truly intends to head to the Academy City and eventually join the battlefield. Even though no one is forcing him to do so, Alan replies that it is a decision he made of his own free will. Some time later, Dogora officially introduces the Granbell family's 2 children, Cecil and her brother, who have spent the last 4 years alongside Alan. After the introductions, Cecil mentions that all of them will take the Academy's entrance examination together in 3 days. When Dogora asks whether they feel prepared, they confidently reply that they are already capable of defeating plate boars. While eating together, the conversation shifts to the academy. Dogora explains that Kirina is already destined to inherit the title of Baroness after graduating and that she will fight alongside Cecil. Cecil's own future, however, will depend on the results he achieves and the choices he makes along the way. The 4 of them then set off for the Academy City. As soon as they arrive, they are astonished by the city's enormous size and discover that young people from all across the kingdom of Rudder train there to develop their talents. Their excitement grows even more when they come across a real train built by the dwarves of the Bossus Empire. Shortly afterward, one of the officials announces that nearly 20,000 applicants will compete for a place in the entrance examination. Before the tests begin, everyone must once again participate in the official ceremony, the very same one they underwent when they were only 5 years old. The evaluations finally begin. Cecil achieves outstanding results and is recommended to proceed to the academic examination. Soon afterward, Kirina also draws attention by earning exceptional scores, especially thanks to her intelligence, which is rated at rank S. However, when it is Alan's turn, the results shock everyone present. His talent is finally identified as that of a summoner, but every one of his attributes is rated at rank E, causing him to fail because his growth potential is considered far too low. Alan's friends cannot accept that evaluation. In their eyes, it is absurd that someone who had single-handedly defeated an assassin Garcia could be treated as if he had no talent. Even an elf observing the ceremony is astonished to learn that a boy of Alan's age accomplished such an incredible feat. Despite defeating an assassin Garcia, Alan still receives an unbelievable evaluation. All of his attributes remain recorded at rank E, something no one present has ever witnessed before. However, the Academy's headmaster immediately recognizes those results. This was exactly the boy Lord Rosen had mentioned earlier. Without going into many details, the headmaster asks Hermios, a legendary hero regarded as one of humanity's greatest hopes, for assistance. As soon as he arrives, Hermios carefully examines Alan's status and realizes that someone is capable of viewing Alan's true attributes. After comparing the information he obtains, he concludes that, despite Alan's enormous magical power and extraordinarily high intelligence, he possesses no conventional magical abilities. Because of this, the headmaster states that the evaluation device may have made an error and allows Alan to continue taking the examination. However, he demands that Alan demonstrate his talent as a summoner. Alan agrees to reveal only the result of his ability, refusing to show everything he is truly capable of. Moments later, he summons Korosuk, a small creature that surprises everyone present. To Alan, that demonstration is enough to prove his talent, and the headmaster officially approves his admission. Next comes the written examination, which consists of mathematics, language, kingdom history, and magical beast knowledge. Alan earns a rank B, Cecil achieves rank S, and Kirina receives rank C. At the end of the examinations, all four pass and officially become students of the Academy. After securing their enrollment, the group learns that they may choose between living in the Academy dormitories or renting a house in the city. Before that, however, they must all obtain an adventurer's medal from the guild. While registering, they receive an explanation about the 3 dungeons connected to the Academy city, which are classified as rank C, rank B, and rank A. Each dungeon has a boss guarding a treasure chest containing extremely rare equipment. Alan takes advantage of the visit to make a rather unusual request. He orders a massive quantity of rank D magic stones and pays 100 gold coins in advance. The guild informs him that the order will be ready in about a week. Shortly afterward, Alan receives his adventurer's medal and officially becomes a rank E adventurer. When asked whether they intend to form a party, Alan agrees without hesitation and chooses the name High Gamer. According to him, the name represents someone willing to risk everything to become stronger and fully dominate the game. In his previous life, he never liked that nickname, but he believes that in this new world, he will finally be able to reach the top. After choosing a large residence to serve as their base, Alan gathers everyone to discuss the group's plans. Cecil reveals that she intends to defeat the Demon King after finishing her studies, fighting directly on the front lines. Kirina agrees to this goal without any hesitation. Dagora is warned that half of the soldiers usually die in the war and is advised to think carefully before making his decision. Even after hearing the warning, he chooses to follow the same path. While they continue talking, Alan surprises his companions by revealing another of his abilities, a flying book. The demonstration leaves everyone impressed. From that moment on, their bonds grow even stronger, and the group begins discussing how they can gain enough strength to face the Demon King. Next, Alan presents his strategy. Their first objective will be to conquer dungeons, overcome challenges, and obtain increasingly better equipment. In addition, he intends to recruit another member to handle healing potions. He then reveals an important secret. His growth speed is 100 times slower than that of normal people. Because of this limitation, he will need to gather a massive amount of magic stones and also find a magic recovery ring hidden in some dungeon. After understanding the reason behind his enormous request for magic stones, everyone agrees to help him. On the first day of classes, Professor Karlova introduces herself as the instructor responsible for the class over the next 3 years. She explains that she also serves as the manager of the capital's Adventurer Guild branch and possesses the skill known as Sword King, having been sent to the academy in the name of the Sword Saint. Before finishing her introduction, Karlova announces that there will be examinations in July and February. Any student who scores less than 40 points will fail, so everyone must take their studies seriously. The academy's daily routine is also explained. Classes take place 4 days a week, and in the afternoon students are divided according to their talents. Since there is no specific class for summoners, Alan is allowed to attend any training he wishes and decides to try all of them. When the first day off finally arrives, the group heads to the dungeon located in the center of Academy City. Before entering, they learn that there is a magical system responsible for managing the entire exploration, sending each party into a different dimension. Because of this, different groups never meet inside the same dungeon. Alan immediately understands how it works and realizes it will allow him to use his summoned beasts without revealing his secret to others. Once inside, they find a vast labyrinth. Alan summons his creatures to locate the correct path and instructs his companions to avoid unnecessary fights. Since the monsters in that area are relatively weak and the treasure chests contain few rewards, their goal is to quickly clear all rank C dungeons in order to reach the rank B ones as soon as possible. During the exploration, Cecil defeats a monster using magic for the first time, which excites everyone. While her companions celebrate the achievement, Alan quietly observes each member's growth. At the same time, he laments that the monsters disappear immediately after being defeated, leaving only magic stones behind, as he would prefer to make use of all available resources. After overcoming one of the dungeon trials, the group discovers the system responsible for controlling the floors. They learn that it is possible to register their progress and return exactly to the same point on a future visit. This discovery completely changes Alan's plans, as he sees a much more efficient way to grow stronger. From that moment on, everyone begins using each day off to explore the dungeon. Since progress is saved, Alan develops a strategy to keep collecting magic stones consistently, making efficient use of his summoned beasts. In a short time, the group carries out multiple expeditions in succession and begins gathering hundreds of magic stones daily. After countless incursions, they finally reach the last floor of the rank C dungeon. At the center of the room lies the boss, still asleep. Before the battle begins, the companions ask to witness Alan's true power as a summoner. Alan then reveals that he has used 35,000 rank D magic stones to upgrade his creatures to enhancement level 6. This strengthening drastically boosts all of his summoned beasts' attributes. He then orders the attack. The summons completely surround the dungeon boss and defeat it in a short time, leaving everyone impressed by the display of power. After the victory, the group opens the reward chest and finds a steel sword. In addition to clearing the rank C dungeon for the first time, they are all promoted to rank D adventurers. The sword is also sold for 2 gold coins, ensuring a solid profit to fund their future explorations. Some time later, during class, the students are informed that the following month there will be a special lesson led by the legendary swordsman de Berg, with the hero himself also in attendance. Alan doesn't show the slightest bit of excitement and thinks to himself that the blue-haired guy really doesn't seem to have anything better to do. Right after that, the instructor announces the main assignment for summer break. Over the next 3 months, every student must conquer a dungeon, and anyone who fails to do so will be expelled from the academy. The rules are simple. Each party can have no more than 8 members, no outside help is allowed, not even from upperclassmen, and everyone must be prepared because fatal accidents happen frequently during these challenges. As soon as the explanation ends, many students begin looking for teammates to form strong parties. Watching all the commotion, Alan thinks it feels a lot like those online chat rooms where everyone is trying to recruit people at the same time. Kirina quickly starts receiving several invitations and asks Alan what she should do. Without wasting any time, he introduces his party to the interested students and announces that they're looking for a skilled cleric to complete the team. They explain that the 4 current members have already cleared 2 rank C dungeons and show their adventurer cards as proof. They also mention that they usually explore dungeons twice a week, and that any new member will need to set aside at least one of those days to join them. Since all the rewards are split evenly and the party is small, each member ends up receiving a larger share of the profits, making the offer even more appealing. The moment he hears the word money, the suspicious boy immediately becomes interested and starts paying close attention to the conversation. Later, during a meal, while Kurina is practically choking as she tries to finish everything she piled onto her plate, Cecil tells Alan that no one has shown any interest in joining their party. He asks if there really aren't any clerics in their class. Alan replies that it's probably because almost every child with talent for healing magic ends up being taken in by the church, so their only option is to keep waiting. As if he had overheard the conversation, Kill shows up at that exact moment. He introduces himself as a cleric and asks if the healer position is still available, saying he'd like to get to know the party better. Alan gets excited right away and invites him to sit down. However, Kill explains that he's trying to avoid eating during the day. Alan looks at the glass of water in front of him and finds it hard to believe that the guy actually needs to be on any kind of diet, thinking the whole situation is strange. He says it would feel awkward to eat while Kill just watched and asks if he can buy him something instead. After thinking it over for a moment, Kill accepts the offer. A little while later, he returns carrying an enormous plate, almost as large as Kina's, and quickly devours everything on it. Without beating around the bush, Kill asks the question he really cares about: how much money the party usually earns from exploring dungeons. Alan answers that each member currently earns between 20 and 40 silver coins per completed dungeon. Hearing that, Kill is completely shocked, since he considers that amount to be enormous. Without a second thought, he asks if he can join the party on a trial basis. Alan immediately agrees, and Kill arranges to meet them the following weekend. Alan and the rest of the party are happy to have Kill join them, and begin treating him with great care. Although Kill finds their kindness unusual, Alan admits to himself that he wants to keep him in the party because a cleric is an incredibly valuable asset. While exploring the dungeon, Kurina notices that she has grown stronger after defeating monsters, and Alan explains that party members share a portion of the experience they earn. On the 3rd day, they reach the dungeon boss and, working together, defeat it quickly. Kill is impressed by the strength of Alan and the others. After the battle, Kill easily heals Dagora's injuries. Alan learns that he mastered healing magic while working at the church after spending months training to acquire the skill. Kurina is amazed to hear that it wasn't something he learned easily. Later, Kurina undergoes intense training with Dieberk to learn a new technique. Following his guidance, she successfully unleashes a powerful slash but collapses from exhaustion. Dieberk explains that he deliberately put her in a real combat situation so she could learn more effectively. Alan thanks him for the help, while Elmius asks when he'll reveal his biggest dream, but Alan says he'll only talk about it once he fully trusts him. Later on, Alan officially introduces Kill as the party's newest member and bodyguard. With a new means of transportation, they're able to move through the dungeon much faster. Kurina also shows off her new skill by defeating a massive monster with a single strike. After reaching rank C as adventurers, the party decides to celebrate with a feast. However, Kill declines because he's worried about his family, who have been struggling ever since they moved to the Academy City. Hearing that, Alan offers a solution. His family could live with them and take care of the household chores in exchange for a salary. Surprised by such generosity, Kill asks why they're willing to help so much. Alan replies that they're friends and that having such an important cleric in the party would benefit everyone. Cecil also suggests splitting the dungeon rewards, using part of the earnings to pay Kill's family in exchange for the magic stones they collect. After giving it some thought, Kill accepts the offer and arrives at Alan's house with his family. However, Alan notices that no priests came with them. At that moment, Kill's younger sister introduces herself as Nina and thanks Alan for inviting them. Shortly afterward, everyone gathers to celebrate with a large feast. During the meal, Alan starts calling Kill "my good sir" and encourages him to enjoy the food. Kill quickly scolds him, saying he doesn't want any special treatment and would rather be treated like everyone else. Alan immediately agrees, although deep down, it was all part of his plan to win Kill over. Even so, Alan notices that Kill's name still hasn't appeared on his guild list as a friend. At that moment, Cecil mentions that she was surprised to learn Kill used to belong to the nobility, since the refined way his sister introduced herself made it obvious. Kill explains that his family was once noble, but lost all of its titles. After that, they lived only with his sister and a few servants who had nowhere else to go. Cecil apologizes for bringing up such a sensitive subject, but Kill says there's no need to worry because he's already gotten used to living as an ordinary commoner. His younger sister, however, interrupts the conversation and says she'll do her part just like everyone else. Dogora comments that social status means absolutely nothing to them. Then Alan reveals that both he and Kirina were born as servants. Everyone is shocked. They had assumed that about Kirina, but they never suspected Alan had the same background because they honestly believed both of them were nobles. Cecil then points out that the assumption wasn't completely wrong since she really was born into a noble family. As soon as they hear that, the servants quickly stand up to show her respect. But Cecil immediately asks them to stop, reminding everyone that inside the academy, he then asks which family she belongs to. She replies that she's a member of the Granville family. The moment that name is mentioned, Nina and all the servants stand up at once and glare at her with obvious hostility. Not understanding their reaction, Cecil asks what happened. Kill replies that the Carnal family was destroyed because of the Granvilles and reveals that his father was an illegitimate son of the Carnal family. Furious, Kill asks what exactly they did to his family. Cecil answers that everyone had been deceived. She says she'll tell him the whole truth, but asks the others to leave the room for a few minutes. Once they're alone, she tells him everything that happened, from the kidnapping to Alan's rescue and the assassin's involvement. Kill has a hard time believing everything he hears. Even so, Cecil tells him that if he still has doubts, he can go to the capital and verify the entire story himself. Alan then asks what his relationship with his father was like when he was a child. Kill replies that until he was 5 years old, his father always took good care of him. However, everything changed after the appraisal ceremony. From that day on, his happy childhood memories came to an end. He was separated from his family, sent to another city, forced to live on a small allowance, and never received the traditional education given to nobles. When he turned 10, a tutor arrived to train him. At the time, he was thrilled to learn that his father had sent the tutor to prepare him for the academy because it gave him hope that he was still considered part of the Carnal family. Everything changed again in October of the previous year, when his allowance suddenly stopped arriving without any explanation. Shortly afterward, his sisters showed up with the servants, who had lost their jobs because their parents had disappeared. It was during that time that Kill began working at the church. Near the end of that year, a royal messenger arrived and explained that the Carnal family had been destroyed because of a conspiracy orchestrated by the Granville family. The same messenger also explained that it was the duty of the nobility to fight monsters. If Kill served for 5 years, the king would pardon the former crimes attributed to the Carnal family, restore its noble title, and appoint him as the new head of the family. Alan immediately realizes that those cursed royal messengers are still carrying out their own schemes. Kill then says he's ashamed of everything his father did. He says he'll completely understand if they want to kick his family out of the house. Even so, he promises to do whatever it takes to restore the Carnal family's name and reclaim the position that once belonged to his father, giving his family a home again, even if it takes 5 full years to accomplish. Alan replies that now that Kill has found a goal, he should know that the other 4 members of the party also have important dreams. They're all moving toward the same future, so he wants Kill to fight alongside them in the war. He makes it clear that he doesn't care at all that Kill belongs to the Carnal family. He also explains that half of the soldiers sent to the front lines die before completing 3 years of service, while those who remain for 5 years face an even higher mortality rate. Alan asks whether the royal messenger failed to mention that detail. Cecil replies that her own brother died just a few months after being sent to the war. That's why they all need to become much stronger to face the monsters. Having Kill in the party will be essential to making up for the team's weaknesses. Alan then reaches out his hand and asks Kill to fight alongside them. Kill asks if he's really sure about that, since, in the end, he'll only be using everyone to achieve his own goal. Alan replies that it doesn't matter because everyone should fight for what they believe in. He says he has no interest in the Demon King. His true goal is to reclaim his noble status. Kirina immediately agrees and says they should all join forces, fight together, and earn back their noble titles. Dogora reminds everyone that, above all else, they're friends. Finally, Cecil comments that she's probably the first member of the Granville family to ever live under the same roof as someone from the Carnal family. Alan tells Kill that he shouldn't have to carry all that weight by himself. Hearing those words, Kill can no longer hold back his tears and finally accepts the invitation to join the party. Alan praised how quickly Kiel and the others moved all the luggage. Pleased with the result, he put Kiel in charge of the household duties and thanked everyone for their hard work. His companions said it was another example of Alan's abilities and believed they would get along well together. The group then entered a rank B dungeon. It looked similar to a rank C dungeon, but the monsters were much more dangerous, ranging from rank D to rank B. There were also traps with arrows and poison, so everyone took antidotes before moving forward. Alan mentioned that he could also use his fork during the expedition. Before advancing, he reminded everyone that only about 20% of parties managed to clear a dungeon of that level and told them to stay alert. Soon after, he summoned Blank, and the group continued deeper inside. While exploring, they found a treasure chest. However, Alan realized it was actually a mimic, a rank B monster. Maria received the support she needed to fight it, and Alan concluded that she could defeat it using only half of her mana. His strategy worked. The enemy was defeated, and inside the real treasure chest, they found a mithril spear worth around 50 gold coins. The discovery motivated everyone to keep going. Some time later, Alan woke up confused and realized he had been caught by a sleep trap. He figured he probably should have taken the antidote as well, but he had avoided it because of its unpleasant taste. Maria began investigating what had happened. Meanwhile, Alan told Krino to continue the training. He then asked Maria what had happened after he lost consciousness. She explained that when Clan arrived, white smoke spread across the area. Soon after, Clan and several party members fell asleep. Even so, no one was injured. Cecil and the others stayed awake because they had taken the antidote before the trap was triggered. Alan also wanted to know how he had woken up so quickly. Maria explained that she had used special seasonings made possible by Mappo's skill, allowing him to regain consciousness in less than 10 seconds. After hearing the explanation, Alan analyzed the trap and concluded that its range was about 5 meters. Since he still did not feel sleepy, he realized the seasonings were still in effect. Maria remained awake, but Clan was still unconscious, so the group decided to test the effect on the summoned beasts. After the tests, Alan fully understood how the trap worked. The plant-type creatures continued distributing mana and stamina recovery potions as usual. He concluded that the seasonings really worked like a status recovery potion. The trap completely affected any living creature, but had no effect on plants or non-living beings. The discovery made everything much easier to understand. Dogora celebrated after successfully using a skill for the first time. The group noticed that his proficiency had increased significantly, and everyone was excited by his progress. Since there was nothing left to collect, they decided to continue through the dungeon while Dogora was eager to show what he could do. After spending 2 months exploring the dungeon on weekends, the group finally reached the deepest floor of the rank B dungeon. There they encountered the boss, a rank B giant boar. Alan analyzed its stats and concluded that the group was strong enough to defeat it. During those 2 months, everyone had quickly reached level 3 in their skills. He also discovered that increased attributes were not exclusive to summoners, since his companions had similar skills and could grow even faster under normal conditions. Before the battle, everyone activated their skills and boosted their attributes. Alan summoned a bear and organized the attack while his companions carried out the strategy. At the right moment, Kurna was ordered to strike the boss's weak point. The attack landed perfectly, and the giant boar was defeated far more easily than anyone had expected. After the victory, a treasure chest appeared. Inside was the hero's golden gauntlets, equipment even tougher than mithril and worth several hundred gold coins. After clearing their second rank B dungeon, Alan realized everyone was becoming much stronger. Even so, he concluded that if warriors that powerful still couldn't stop the Demon King's army during the war, then their enemies had to be far more dangerous than he had imagined. During the last month, Alan sent his summoned beasts to hunt monsters in rank B dungeons. As a result, he collected 34,760 rank C magic stones and 425 gold coins. He then used those stones to request an exchange for 310,000 rank D magic stones. Since there was a monthly limit of 50,000 stones, he planned to obtain the rest using all the rewards he had earned. Alan also bought a carriage to make traveling between the base and the dungeons easier, along with a magic clock that allowed him to keep track of time even inside dungeons. Meanwhile, everyone passed their final academy exams. In August, shortly after clearing their second rank B dungeon, summer vacation began and would last for 2 months. After a long journey, Alan returned home, where his family welcomed him back. Gerda was also there to welcome him. When Alan arrived, he found several letters waiting for him, including messages from Krina and Dogora. Since he wasn't very good at reading or writing, he decided to save them for later. Even so, he was happy to see that his friends were doing well and still working hard. While talking with his family, he also learned that Mura had been appointed to a government position. Although she insisted she wasn't especially talented, everyone said she took after her parents. During the conversation, Alan learned that his father had been appointed mayor of a new settlement. The family would move there in April of the following year to help develop the region. Alan was happy to hear the news and congratulated his parents. He also found out that the entire family would be moving together. Thinking about it, Alan realized his parents were already in their 30s and believed it was the perfect time for them to establish a new village. Since his father would become its leader, Alan decided he needed to learn how to read as soon as possible. Later, Alan was asked about Keel and confirmed that he really was a member of the former Carnal family. Although there had been resentment in the past, he explained that all the misunderstandings had been resolved. Keel was now a friend, studied alongside them, and helped clear dungeons. Even so, there were concerns about a promise made by a royal messenger. According to him, if Keel completed 5 years of service on the battlefield, the Carnal family would regain its former noble title. After hearing the story, they questioned whether that promise could really be trusted. If the order had truly come from the king, restoring the Carnal family would be possible. However, there was another, far more troubling possibility. Because Keel had talent as a monk and healer, there were suspicions that the nobles intended to use him as part of a larger scheme. If he survived the 5 years of war, he could be forced to remain on the battlefield to protect the nobles' sons, who had also been sent to fight. Many nobles relied on this because priests and healers were extremely rare during wartime. While ordinary healers stayed in the kingdom treating the wounded and sick, most of the medical work on the battlefield was handled by the elves of Rosenheim. However, they did not interfere in private affairs. Healing potions were also limited, making priests even more valuable. After hearing the explanation, Alan realized that some soldiers never returned home. Even after completing their required service, they were kept on the battlefield through secret agreements between nobles and remained there until they lost their lives. They also suspected that as soon as Keel's talent was discovered, some people had already planned to turn him into another piece in that system. That meant the royal messenger might have deceived him from the very beginning, using the promise of restoring the Carnal family only to send him to war. Alan concluded that the theory made sense and decided to confront the messenger himself to uncover the truth. Before he could act, however, one of his allies asked to handle the matter instead. Since the messenger had been sent by the Granbell family, and the fake identity used during that operation was also involved, he believed it was his responsibility to settle the issue himself. Alan accepted the offer and thanked him for the help. Alan replied that it would still be some time before they left for the battlefield, so he decided to wait before taking action. Meanwhile, summer vacation gave the group many more opportunities to explore dungeons. After a great deal of effort, they cleared their 3rd rank B dungeon and received the official reward from the Adventurers Guild. While presenting the reward, a guild employee warned Alan that he would probably start challenging ranked dungeons next. However, he emphasized that the bosses of those dungeons were extremely powerful. Very few adventurers could make a living by clearing them, and many traps remained unknown. He recommended that the group do plenty of research before attempting the next dungeon. The employee also explained that the guild auction could be very useful. Besides allowing adventurers to sell rare equipment for high prices, it was also a great place to buy hard-to-find items. Alan asked whether it was possible to obtain a magic power recovery ring. The answer was no, but he learned that, although extremely rare, it was possible to find a stamina recovery ring and a ring of singularity. Some time later, Alan woke up inside a ranked dungeon. Since there was no difference between day and night there, he realized he still couldn't locate their objective, even after using Hawk to scout the area from above. The dungeon was enormous, and the group had already spent several days trapped on the same floor, making camp life increasingly exhausting. Alan asked whether any monsters had attacked while he was asleep. Maria replied that a few had appeared, but she eliminated them before they could cause any trouble. Seeing that none of his summoned beasts had been destroyed, Alan realized everything had remained under control while he rested. A little later, the group encountered two Ockings and a Cyclops blocking their path. Alan ordered everyone not to let the monsters advance and reminded them that they no longer needed to fear rank B enemies. They all attacked at once and quickly gained control of the battle. However, just when everything seemed under control, an unexpected trap was triggered. Part of the group was teleported to another area of the massive dungeon, completely separating the party. Alan immediately recognized the situation and organized a rescue operation. Maria was tasked with producing as many magic cards as possible before taking the Leaf of Life and the magic seed to find Cecil and Dagora. Meanwhile, Alan sent his summoned creatures in different directions to search for their missing companions. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Cecil and Dagora were in a desperate situation. Surrounded by monsters and running out of options, they kept fighting as their strength rapidly faded. Even with barely any energy left, Dagora continued resisting to buy time until help arrived. A short time later, one of Alan's summoned creatures finally found the two of them and reported back. As soon as Alan received the news, he rushed to rescue them, telling them to hold on just a little longer. As he ran through the massive dungeon, Alan struggled to navigate its incredibly complex maze. Even though he knew the route, every detour slowed him down. Still, he pushed himself as fast as possible, hoping to reach Dagora and Cecil before it was too late. During their exploration, Alan and his companions encountered a massive rank A monster. The creature stood about 30 feet tall and had incredibly high physical defense. Alan realized his attacks might not be enough to damage it, but he saw an opportunity. If he could defeat such a durable enemy, it would prove he was capable of taking on other monsters at that level. Since he had grown much stronger, Alan decided to challenge the boss without hesitation. However, the gap in strength between enemies kept increasing, so he switched out several cards to improve his abilities. He chose new combinations, using Steel with the replacement skill, Shark Fin with Shark Oil, and Skirt Steak with the Awakening Spread skill. Following the group's strategy, Alan launched the attack. First, he used his new technique to summon a barrier that protected his allies. Then everyone unleashed their strongest attacks against the enemy. A massive meteor-like attack crashed down on the monster, astonishing everyone nearby. The power of the strike looked just like a powerful spell, but his companions joked that Alan should stop borrowing other people's technique names. After defeating every monster in the area, Alan and his party cleared the most difficult dungeon in their training. The rewards were just as impressive: a huge rank A magic stone and a treasure chest. Inside, they found a Hihiro cane axe. Everyone was shocked, since it was rare to find a weapon of that caliber. After completing the dungeon, the players were congratulated and received a permanent dungeon completion certificate. The rule was simple: anyone who cleared 5 permanent dungeons would earn the right to challenge a ranks dungeon. Hearing that, Alan realized his next challenge would be even stronger enemies. The boss would also be rank S, but the chance to earn incredible rewards made it even more appealing. During summer break, Alan turned 13. Thanks to his guidance, he helped his class clear a rank C dungeon. Only 3 students gave up before completing the challenge. When the other students learned that Alan and his group had cleared a ranked dungeon, they were amazed. Alan and Kirina were summoned by the school principal, who surprised Alan by inviting him to participate in the martial arts tournament. The competition would feature second-year students and important guests, including members of foreign royal families. At first, Alan planned to decline because he believed his summons would not be useful in one-on-one combat. However, after learning that the winner would earn the chance to challenge West Doberg, he changed his mind and decided to enter, choosing Kirina to represent him. One day before the tournament, Keel and Nina arrived at Alan's base with several other guests. After noticing the resemblance between Keel and Commander Carnal, Alan discovered they were connected to the old promise made to the Carnal family. They presented a new official contract signed by the King and the Granville and Hamilton families. Its purpose was to restore the Carnal family's status if they achieved great accomplishments on the battlefield. Riffle Hamilton explained that he was representing his family and accepting responsibility for the agreement between the 3 families. As Keel's guardian, his role was to look after children from noble families with little influence. While Keel was working, his family would remain under the protection of the Hamilton family. Keel thanked him for the support, but still could not understand why anyone would go so far for them. Riffle explained that nobles must honor their contracts and take responsibility for their own decisions. As the head of the Granville family, he was simply doing what he believed was right. Before ending the conversation, however, Riffle said there was something important everyone needed to know. After reviewing the documents and agreements related to the Carnal family, new information came to light. The investigation revealed that the royal oaths received by Keel were tied to the same royal family. Among those involved was Crown Prince Imbul Han Latash, the man most likely to inherit the throne once the current king grew old. However, there was still no evidence that the prince had been directly involved in the conspiracy against the Carnal family. Even the king himself could not take action against him without solid proof. The person truly responsible for Cecil's kidnapping and Keel's manipulation was still hiding in the shadows. The mastermind behind everything remained a complete mystery. Meanwhile, His Majesty continued carrying out his duties as usual. However, there was one major concern. Within 5 years, the Crown Prince would most likely become the new king, and no one knew whether he would honor the agreement made with the Carnal family. Despite that uncertainty, Keel decided to keep moving forward. Thanks to the help he had received, the possibility of restoring his family's status, which had once seemed impossible, had finally become real. As the current head of the Carnal family, Keel declared that he would do whatever was necessary to fulfill his duty. The next day, the Academy's martial arts tournament began. Alan was eager to watch Kirina compete. During the event, Alan and the others noticed a golden stone placed in the main arena. That was when they realized the Crown Prince was among the honored guests. The biggest surprise of the tournament was Kirina. Even though she was only a first-year student, she defeated a third-year student and advanced all the way to the finals. Her next opponent would be Lord Diverger. Everyone knew his reputation. For many years in a row, Diverger had defeated every tournament champion and remained the undefeated title holder. The anticipation was enormous because it would be another chance to witness the sage's legendary sword technique. Kirina faced Diverger determined to prove her strength, remembering everything she had accomplished as a magical beast hunter. However, as the battle unfolded, the gap in skill between them became obvious. Diverger blocked every attack and defeated Kirina with ease, successfully defending his championship title. Even in defeat, Diverger acknowledged her effort and encouraged her to keep getting stronger. Kirina realized she still had a long way to go, but Alan and his companions supported her, reminding her that this loss was simply another goal to overcome in the future. After the match, Diverger praised the fight and said that the duel between two sages had been truly remarkable. Afterward, the Crown Prince invited Shishaku to a private meeting in a secluded location, where she was surprised to see a servant present during the conversation. The prince commented that the Granville dormitory was operating smoothly. He also pointed out that, with the birth of a new sage, it was now possible to obtain mithril. In addition, he mentioned the defeat of the Carnal family's longtime rival. However, Alan explained that the situation could not really be considered a complete victory. The crown prince revealed that he also had a 10-year-old daughter. But there was one problem. She possessed an extremely rare talent. Because of that, he asked Granbell to persuade His Majesty to grant her the right to enter into a contract. In return, he promised to pretend that the conversation had never happened. The reason behind his request was simple. Priests were extremely valuable on the battlefield, especially because of their healing abilities. Some had signed contracts to serve exclusively as medical support for noble families. Everything was connected to the prince's desire to keep Keel close to his daughter. Alan then questioned what a contract truly meant to a noble. He realized that the prince was willing to reveal important information simply because he was worried about his own daughter. Even so, Master Saku said it could become a great opportunity to gain an advantage in the war. At that moment, Alan made his position clear. He was the leader of the group responsible for protecting Saint Curina and Lady Cecil. His duty was not only to accompany the sages, but also to ensure Cecil's safety above all else. The prince acknowledged his determination and asked whether Alan would protect his daughter if she were ever sent to the battlefield. Alan answered that he was ready to accept that responsibility. However, the prince gave him a warning. If Alan truly intended to take on that duty, he would have to do everything in his power to protect the girl. 3 months passed. During that time, Alan raised his enhancement skill to level 7. Now he was ready to challenge the boss of a permanent dungeon once again after failing to defeat it many times before. After 76 attempts, Alan finally reached the dungeon's strongest enemy, the heavy dragon. The creature was considered the greatest challenge in the dungeon, but Alan was determined to test his own strength. Even though the guild members believed the battle was far too dangerous, he decided to move forward. This time, however, he was much better prepared. Alan had upgraded his equipment and obtained a ring that boosted his abilities. Against the dragon, his top priority was protecting the party. He summoned Steel to defend his companions and warned everyone to stay alert for the dragon's breath attack. He even joked that he should probably stop copying Cecil's technique names. After that, Alan summoned Kavio to assist in the battle. Using the creature's borrowed abilities, he changed his strategy and launched a powerful bomb at the dragon. However, the heavy dragon showed no sign of fear. The creature possessed overwhelming strength and extraordinary durability. To the monster, those attacks were almost meaningless, and it continued advancing without hesitation. Even after using his strongest attacks, Alan realized that this enemy was completely different from any he had faced before. He then summoned Fran to join the battle. The fight became even more difficult. The heavy dragon's physical defense was incredible, and its attacks placed tremendous pressure on every member of the party. When the heavy dragon prepared its breath attack, Alan recognized the danger and ordered Steel to shield the group. Although the attack was successfully blocked, it became obvious that the dragon's abilities were far beyond those of the previous monsters. Kavio became essential to the party's defense, while Alan focused on figuring out the dragon's attack patterns. During the battle, the dragon unleashed another devastating breath attack, destroying 4 steel units at once. Alan realized he needed to improve his strategy while Claire, Dogora, and Heel worked to keep everyone alive. The fight grew more desperate with every passing moment until Curina was struck head-on. Everyone believed she had been defeated, but a special skill called Limit Break activated. Alan immediately recognized the power because he had seen it when Curina was a child. With all of her attributes increasing by 3,000 points and her energy rapidly recovering, Curina revealed an entirely new level of strength and charged at the heavy dragon, becoming the first real threat capable of standing against it. And that's the end of another episode. If you made it all the way to the end, comment rank S so I know you watched the entire video. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episodes. There are more videos coming your way next week. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.